everyone. Welcome to the Medieval Buzz. For me, a medieval sewing party. For Philip, a chance to chat about the fun happenings in the medieval world. And we are here to discuss medieval Greenland today. So,
Why?
Philip, how are things going over there in the not so distant island of Okinawa?
Okinawa, busy enough. It was a good few talks. We were talking about this. What was it called? 2 weeks
Oh
ago.
no, we can't hear
Oh,
you anymore.
can't hear
Or
me
I
again.
can't hear
No
you.
way. Lost sound again. Jesus
Your sound
Christ.
is gone. It was there. It was great. And then you added the backdrop and suddenly your sound went away. Okay, well, okay. Twitchy, can you hear me? And can you hear Philip?
Can you hear me?
Because I can no longer hear Philip,
Oh,
unfortunately.
everything's got it wrong.
Right. Well, while we try to, audio's good on my end. Okay. Can you hear Philip? Because I can only hear me.
Oh,
Kevin,
well,
welcome.
gone.
Shell Backbow, lovely to see you. As in
Yes, thank
honor
you.
of the fact that we're discussing Greenland today, I'm dressing in a wool kirtle that is much more appropriate to the style of clothing that would have been worn in medieval Greenland. Although I was just having a conversation earlier today about, uh, not a conversation, I was commenting on a video essay I was listening to on medieval Greenland, and he made this really terrible. I can always tell when people who have no idea about medieval clothes really make comments about them. He was actually attributing the failure of the Greenland colony to the clothing they wore. He called it
Oh,
drafty. They
what?
were wearing multiple layers of fulled wool. Their clothing was not drafty. Um, and what he said, the reason he said it was drafty is because their garments were voluminous.
Mm.
Clearly, he doesn't understand the idea about insulating layers, like the way that the peoples in the deserts wear them, where you have voluminous garments and there's lots of air underneath of them, and that air is heated by your body, and that air is
I
trapped
also-
in between the layers, therefore creating multiple layers of insulation between you and the cold air itself. Yeah,
mm.
I couldn't help it. I had to respond and leave a comment that his statement about drafty garments was completely wrong.
Oh, that's proven. It's proven
Yeah,
the
I know,
clothing.
Twitchy, right? That it's their drafty woolen garments that led to the decease of the Greenland colony. And he also, and I hate it when people say this, that the people of the medieval Greenland colony wore fashionable European clothing. They absolutely were not wearing the latest in fashions. For any given period to which their clothing dates, that style of garment had been out of fashion in Europe for 50 years or more.
Mm.
The other thing about the extant garments from medieval Greenland is that shellback boat, it's silly that the wool garments that the Greenlanders are wearing were drafty and led to their demise, to the failure of the colony, failure to adapt, to not, because they didn't, because they weren't wearing what the Inuits were wearing, then the colony failed, is the argument, and it's bullshit. Just pure bullshit.
Of
Pure
course,
bullshit.
bullshit. There's
Um,
perfect interaction between the two.
that is
Like,
not what led to the failure of the colony.
mm.
So
Very-
the loss of the Greenland colony was down to a lack of fleeced socks, which they probably had
yeah.
because in Scandinavia they have null binding, which is a form of single needle knitting. Philip,
Mm.
can
Hear me?
anyone hear Philip? Philip, are you talking?
I think chat can hear me all
Are you
right.
talking? Can anyone hear Philip? I can't
Can
hear
you hear me?
him.
I think Susan says she can hear me.
Takeda, lovely to see you under Impizar. Nice. At least I think that's your handle on Twitch, right?
It could be in my hat. I don't. I think that's you.
Yeah, wind tight outer layer is very important. Yep. So, this gentleman was basically saying that it's because of these drafty garments, but if you and that they were fashionable. They weren't fashionable. If you look at what people were wearing in the fashionable parts of Europe, even the peasants, in fact, were wearing very tight garments by the second half of the 15th century and into the 15th century. They were not wearing big voluminous garments. That style of garment dates much more to the early 14th century and the 13th century, when everything got really sort of big and voluminous as a counter reaction to the tight garments of the 12th century. So they definitely weren't dressing fashionably in the Greenland colony. They were always a lot behind. But I
Mm.
think it had less to do about dressing fashionably, and I think that their garments were intentionally designed to be voluminous, to create these layers of air, of insulation between their skin and the the increasingly frigid temperatures of the Little Ice Age. I
Mm,
think they were built that way on purpose. That wasn't an accident. It wasn't just that they were out of fashion. It was a survival adaptation, actually. Yeah. If you cloaks are basically massive blankets and warmer than modern coats, but super drafty.
mm.
Yeah. Audio is good on both. I cannot hear Philip at all.
Oh
That's
no,
fascinating.
I can
Okay.
hear you.
Okay, wait. Okay. Somehow
Oh,
my phone completely turned down. That's great.
oh
That's
right,
great.
now you can hear
It
me.
turned it turned itself down. Isn't that awesome? I love it.
Yes, that makes perfect sense.
It makes perfect sense.
Because I tried the same thing there on my phone. I originally wanted all this on my phone because it looks and sounds better, and it was refusing to let the sound work on my phone. So no, I'm not surprised.
Yeah, yeah. This is there seem we seem to have techno gremlins this morning.
Oh,
Uh, yeah, and the Twitchy makes a good comment that having voluminous clothes also makes lining them in fur easier. Yeah, exactly. If you have tight fitted garments, as I'm finding out, you can't really line them in fur.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, seriously, Philip, you've worn wool. You have
Yes.
you wear wool layers of wool. Is it drafty? Is it is
Oh,
it unpleasant when it's cold and wet?
unless, like, the only unpleasantry you'll get is if you're not wearing your linen tunic first.
Yeah,
That's the
yeah,
only time it becomes unpleasant. And people did that on purpose who were part of the clergy in Ireland. I don't know, maybe you can have a few references of people outside of Ireland who did it. But you have
oh, yeah,
Lawrence, St. Lawrence in particular of Ireland, who would purposely, on purpose, used to not wear his linen shirt. And it was a big deal. This was a huge, massive deal that he wasn't wearing his linen
yeah,
shirt because of how uncomfortable. And he'd be at a feast and people would highlight how uncomfortable it was against his chest because it would cause rash, chafing, and also the itchiness of it.
yeah.
That's the only time I've ever come across it in the literature where people were complaining about what was it called, the wool. But
Uncomfortable.
another,
Yeah,
yeah, another very good point you brought up as well is the fact that the Vikings did and the Irish had socks during the winter. Even
yeah,
yesterday, people were bringing up this whole idea of uncivilized Irish, and yet there's solid evidence of the Irish having socks and shoes during the medieval period. The thing
yeah,
is that when you're running around the countryside, well, first and foremost, as the chat always makes fun of, is the fact you don't want your good shoes being covered in mud. The second thing being is this insanely, until 1920, it is very, very slippery around the place. So even foot wise, people had socks and shoes to wear. And what they would do as well, if they needed to keep their shoes on to compromise it, and we actually have evidence of this in Dublin, they would put spikes on their feet. So they would put spikes on the soles of the feet so they wouldn't slip and fall. And I
yeah.
guarantee that,
They also had wooden overshoes, which have been excavated from Dublin, called
yeah,
pattens. So
patent.
there's ways to protect your feet. That whole thing, and that whole thing you were mentioning about the wool against your skin. There were a lot of holy, but it was only the religious whack jobs. Excuse me. It was only the respected and very pious men and women of the church who did that, who
Yeah,
wore the wool or a hair shirt. Again, Thomas a Becket was known for that.
yeah,
When he after his murder, right after his assassination, when they undressed him, it was pretty scary. The kind of wounds he had, kind of all over his torso from where he was wearing a hair shirt. So it was worse than just wool. He was wearing a hair shirt right against his skin. But
yeah, yeah,
yeah, but in terms of warmth, it's like there's nothing beating wool, right? All these synthetic fabrics that we have now, wool is still superior, actually, in my opinion.
yeah,
Better protect because wool. Maybe have you experienced this yourself? When your wool gets wet, it stays warm even if it's wet.
yeah, big time.
Most
Especially
people
in
don't know
Ireland.
that.
Yeah. And
Yeah. So
it's the same thing with the nice, comfortable cloak over me as well. Like the fact that that will get wet, wet, unless it's very, very bad. You're not really going to get soaked through, and
yeah,
it's 1,000 times more comfortable than a lot of stuff that I wear these days.
yeah. You'd have to be. That's the thing about wool. It's pretty waterproof until it isn't.
Yeah,
Right. Like there's
it's really-
there's there's definitely a point at which your wool will finally reach a saturation point where it just becomes a sponge. But for the most part, it's pretty water resistant. So this idea that it's wearing wool in loose layers that killed the Greenland colony is it's just it smells real bad. Okay, I'm gonna have to take my headset off to put off on my kerchief, so I'll be able to see you all, but I won't be able to hear you.
I'm sure you'll be fine for the next 5 minutes, and she can't hear a thing. What's chat doing? My cloak is my favorite garment. Yeah, same with myself. I have Twitchy Witch. I have the Kilkenny brooch. If you Google, it shows you the Kilkenny brooch from the 9th century, and that's my favorite. I love showing it off. The only problem with the Kilkenny brooch is the fact that the end of it's really sharp. So, especially when you're drinking and stuff, when people go over to hug you or whatever, it pokes and stabs into them. So that's the only problem I have with the Kilkenny brooch, but it's actually one of my favorite finds of all time. If you go to Google and just type in Kilkenny brooch, you'll find it instantly. Absolutely gorgeous find, and it's a Hiberno Scandinavian find as well. So you can have a good look at it as well, and then do a comparison to a Norwegian. Um, what was it? Pin find as well, because I don't know how much the Norwegians use brooches, but the Irish absolutely love brooches. And the other one, oh, actually, that pins us back to Greenland, because what gets super popular in Dublin is the ivory brooches. You know, the ivory pin
Yeah,
brooches?
the walrus, the walrus ivory.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So that's something a lot of people don't realize, that everyone's like, well, why did they go to Greenland? Well, for one, Eric the Red was exiled from Iceland because he murdered someone again, and he was he was exiled for 3 years.
Mm.
Um, so he made a virtue out of a vice, I guess, and he says to some people, "Hey, let's go check out this land I heard about that's to the west of here, because there were this another a man earlier, Bjarni something or other, had been sailing, and he sighted land while he was out there sailing. He kind of got a little lost, so he came back and reported it to Iceland. So Eric the Red is like, yeah, I have to leave, so will you all go with me, and let's see what we can get going there? So the people who went with Eric the Red weren't Vikings, they weren't raiders, they were farmers for the most part. They
Yeah.
were settlers looking to establish a life. And what they found is that, as you were saying, that there was this walrus ivory was plentifully available. There was a huge number, way more than there were by the end of the colony,
Mm.
of walruses. And so their entire economy was based on basically walrus ivory. And then they also figured out about making, I didn't know this until I started looking into it. They actually started making rope out of walrus hide,
Oh, I did not know
which
that either.
I didn't know
Explain.
that either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
that's absolutely amazing. It is very interesting as well. But I just want to jump back because there's another argument I want to go against as well, that you highlighted earlier about them dying because they didn't have the right clothing. To me, makes no sense because of the trade that was going on between the Viking Greenlanders. That's what I'm going to call them now. Is Viking Greenlanders and the Scandinavians living in Greenland
right.
and the natives, both coming from the New World over to trade with them. But I don't know what the full story is here. Maybe you found bits and bobs. But what's the story with the immigration going from the New World into Greenland? Because there's lots of debate on who came onto the island first, and I know that's become even worse now with recent political events and stuff.
Yeah.
But from your research and study, I personally believe that from the 13th century onwards, there definitely seems to be natives getting onto the island and some level of mixing going on, I think. Especially with a later reference from 1735, where a Danish man asked one of the locals what happened, and they talk about some story about a Scandinavian just having a banter. It seems like a banter fight that kicks off about them throwing javelins at each other. That seems to indicate some level of hostility there. But the fact that they are talking about natives on Greenland itself seems to be something going on where there seems to be a level of immigration going from the New World over into
Yeah.
Greenland. What's your perspective on that one?
Yeah. So it seems that going back for thousands of years, as far as the archaeology indicates, there's a constant there's a series of waves of arrivals and departures. There's constantly people's coming from, as far as the archaeology shows, from west to east, and coming and settling, having a settlement in Greenland, and then going away again. And then another group of peoples comes, and they settle in Greenland, and then they go away again, and again and again and again. And it wouldn't surprise me. I didn't have a chance to look into this. I would hypothesize that it has to do with warming and cooling cycles,
Okay.
right? Temperatures get warmer. Greenland, the ice caps start melting. More land is available. It becomes more pleasant for settling. More more livestock or more wildlife is available for hunting, and the peoples come, they settle, and then the next cooling cycle comes, and the ice caps grow. Greenland literally subsides into the ocean pretty much every time this happens, because the weight
Yeah.
of the ice cap pushes it into the ocean, and so
Mm,
then the water rises as well. So I suspect, who was the first peoples? We really don't know who the first ones were, but
mm,
but as far as we can tell, as far as I could tell based on what I read, when the Norse arrived, there was no one else there. This was one of those interim periods. And then, like you said, in the 13th century, we have evidence of a peoples called the Thule who arrived. They settle way further north, though.
yeah.
They go up to the top of Baffin Bay. They're not as interested in what's kind of further south.
Mm, mm, mm,
But there's tons of evidence of trade. Like we talked about this last time, right? Like
mm.
there's there are tons of medieval European artifacts found all over the eastern and northern parts, western and northern parts of Baffin Bay, and
Yeah.
going well into those islands that eventually come to be covered mostly in ice.
Mm,
So, there's tons of evidence of trade. We don't have as much evidence on the European side, on the Scandinavian side. And the theory for that is that the Scandinavians were trading their goods for meat. They were
okay.
trading their goods for caribou, for comestibles, for consumables, rather than for actual, wares in daily life.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting, all right. And Shell brings up a really interesting, view of the medieval world as well, where he points out when I hear medieval, I think 900 AD to the 13th century, right, which is very Viking of you, Shell. But it's interesting that he says that, right, and because he elaborates on that, and I don't think of the 14th and 17th century as medieval, right? And
Right.
it's very interesting on that because of the fact when I was doing my reading as well, originally when I thought of Greenland, I thought, there's a little bit of an interaction with Finland around the 11th century, right? And then I just assumed, it's, evaporated and disappeared. But when you read into this, we have an interaction going into the New World, going all the way up to the 16th century, which is very funny because I imagined anyway, especially reading other people's literature of the world and stuff, that, the Vikings made it over to Vinland in 1000 AD and then they just evaporated. And then
Right.
500 years later, Christopher Columbus sailed to America. That's kind of the image, quite literally. I'm confident. I literally read that from a medieval book, a common
Yeah.
history book.
Yeah. Those
So,
textbooks, man, they are
yeah.
so inaccurate.
So now I have this interpretation of, when I read the literature, especially last night and stuff, into Greenland, I find it very, very funny that that's not actually the case at all, that the New World and all of it didn't just suddenly evaporate. In fact, we have plenty of Native Americans up around that region with their own diverse names, interacting with the Greenlanders. And from what I
Yep.
understand, and I think it's also very blurry for the Danish as well, who were documenting this in the 18th century, is they don't, as like myself reading it, I'm not sure
Yeah.
what's going on, especially with the natives going on to Greenland. Like, are they going on to Greenland as well? We know that there are, natives on the island by the time the Danish rock up. That's what I'm assuming as well.
Oh yeah,
Especially,
yeah. So
yeah,
as far as I can tell, the Thule don't go away again. Like
yeah,
once they arrive in the 13th century, they
uh,
basically they're there to stay.
yeah,
As far as I can tell, they don't they're even though it just get much colder because of the little ice age, the
Mm,
apparently the Thula are are the one people who aren't intimidated by that. I
yeah.
guess. So yeah, they are there when the Danish come back to finally see what happened to the colony,
Yeah.
right? It's like to finally check on this colony. It's like, guys, it's been 300 years since you heard anything. You're just now coming back to check it up.
Yeah.
But I read do you know what the incentive was? Do you know what caused them to actually go there as a
Actually,
government funded? Yeah, so this God God bless the Reformation. So the King of Denmark basically says, "Well,
yes.
we
Actually,
haven't had con we haven't had contact with this colony in 300 years. We're now Lutheran. We have to make sure those Greenlanders aren't Catholic."
yeah.
I'm dead serious. That's why they go to check on the colony to make sure that they're Lutheran.
Okay.
and
Yeah.
then
I remember reading that.
and then they find no one.
Yeah. Surprise,
Like,
surprise.
well, good news, there are no Catholics. Bad news, there's no one.
Yeah. I suppose they could just tell the natives about Lutheran. Have you heard of Lutheran? He has a message for
The
you.
Lutheran Jesus is different than
Yeah,
the
yeah,
Catholic
yeah.
Jesus.
I'm not going down that rabbit hole, that's for sure.
Right? God damn, no.
It's
No,
not
but it's yeah, it's the you're right. It's the Vinland colony does seem to be really short lived.
mm,
And I actually shorter lived than the Greenland colony. And one of the theories is that the Little Ice Age basically kind of it kicks off in the 13th century.
mm,
That's when temperatures start going down, and of course, the further north you are, the more you're going to feel this.
mm.
And the apparently, what I read is that the ice flows really started increasing drastically in the North Atlantic,
Yeah.
and so it made it harder and harder for ships to actually reach Greenland and Vinland, let alone Vinland, right? It made it harder and harder for ships to get that far until by the 15th century, you've got one ship coming per year
Oh
to
god.
resupply the island. It's not, it's a lose-lose situation,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah, that seems to be very funny, all right, and it's all down to the fact that there was a lack of need of Greenland ivory compared to the African ivory and the ivory coming over from India and all that stuff. Once the Portuguese get around Africa and they're flying into the Asian market, that's the point where Greenland, the colony, doesn't dominate anymore. And as you pointed out there as well, with the rise of the the Ice Age, interaction with Greenland becomes more and more difficult. And so the ivory trade going from Greenland to Iceland and then over to Norway gets more and more difficult for them to do. And of course, then Norway is taken in from the Danish realm. And then eventually, as we point out there, the Danish coming up to investigate, let's convert them. Oh, there's no one there.
Yeah, that's right. So
Mm,
the walrus trade is really interesting because
mm,
in I don't know, the first half of the first couple of hundred years of the Greenland colony,
mm,
walrus ivory is super valuable. It is a super luxury item because there's almost no elephant ivory coming into continental Europe, but
yeah,
everyone wants this ivory for these beautiful carvings,
yeah,
right? So the Greenland colony is actually paying its currency is ivory. It pays its tithes to the church in ivory. It's everything, right? It's the problem with a one resource economy. They discover
yeah,
very quickly. But what's funny is you can tell when walnut ivory, walrus ivory stops being valuable because in about the early 14th century, the church basically says you have to start paying your tithes in silver and gold. Don't send us more of this worthless walrus ivory.
oh no.
So yeah, so that's
When did that happen?
that was in the early 14th century. I don't remember. There's actually a date when the representative of the Pope basically sends sends a message to Greenland and says, "Yeah, you need to pay this in silver and gold. No more of this ivory stuff,
Yeah, they
because
might as
it's
well
just
have
not
been the
that
Romans writing to Britain in 410 saying you're left
right."
on your own device. What was it? Their own defenses. You have to. We're abandoning in
Yeah,
Britain. You're left to your own devices. That was there. Something on that letter, but it was a letter that came in
yeah.
410 saying good luck to you. You know, they might as well have written that letter over the Greenland at that point.
Yeah, in case you're wondering, they didn't start paying in silver and gold because
Mm.
Shocker, there is no silver or gold, at least none that they found in
Yeah.
Greenland. So they did not start paying their tithes. They kept sending the walrus ivory.
Oh no. Yeah, so that was
Yeah,
them basically out of it because I know, right, when I was doing my reading over the weekend and stuff, and the connections that was going over to Dublin, Dublin gets kicked out of the game as well. Once the Normans come into Ireland and they occupy Dublin, they switch from the Scandinavian trade markets into the
right.
European trade markets. So whatever trade was coming in is mostly focused around France, which for the most part is quite good for Dublin because Dublin then gets the wider European trade network. So the merchants of Dublin are actually surprisingly quite content with this. You would assume that the Irish merchants will be flying the tricolour and stuff, saying no English goods here. But in reality, because
Yeah.
it connected a lot of Irish merchants to the continent of Europe and they were making more money, they were quite content. But on the negative side of things, things like ivory and stuff become more disconnected from Dublin from that point onwards. Because before then, God, Dublin is packed with ivory. There's so much ivory. As I was saying there, originally would have had the nice little cloak brooch and stuff, and then it's switching over to that ivory pin. Absolutely gorgeous. And the thing is, God, you'd love to get even more finds in Dublin because you could imagine some of those would easily be carved with all kinds of wild stuff in it because there's so much other stuff that's, beautifully carved in ivory
Yeah,
and stuff.
the medieval. This is how Greenland actually plays an integral part in the history of medieval art.
Yeah.
Is that they are for a long time, for centuries, they are the primary suppliers of the prime raw material for these beautiful caskets, the brooches, like you said,
Mm,
pendants, book covers, croziers. I mean, there are croziers that have survived that are darn it, walrus ivory, right? So these it was a great gig while it lasted. Unfortunately, the reality is that if your entire economy is predicated on one commodity, and these suddenly there's a whole new, much cheaper source of that commodity,
mm,
you're really screwed. And they were, but it wasn't just that, right? If the little the thing is that the little ice age was going to make it very impossible for them to stay where they were anyway. Um, this is really, I saw this other weird comment under this video essay that I was watching, that, well, until we find the bodies, we'll never really know what happened to them. I'm like, you do know that they have found lots and lots of bodies,
mm,
right? They have they have excavated cemeteries. There are cemeteries, and actually, one of the interesting things that they've done in the excavations of these cemeteries is they've analyzed the bones for various carbon markers in them,
mm,
and they've actually been able to identify the change in diet of the Greenland settlement over the centuries as you go from the tenth century forward to the 15th century. And do you
mm.
know what? Do you know what happened to their diet? Do you know what became their primary source of caloric intake by the end?
What's that?
Seal. They were
Ah,
eating seal. Have you
yeah.
ever eaten seal?
I'm sure he did. I don't think it was
Oh
that bad.
no, you would remember. It's
Oh,
terrible.
this is it very
Oh,
bad?
it's super terrible. So
Oh,
so seal is really disgusting,
yeah.
and it's one of these things that because it's the fat. It has so much fat in
Mm,
between the layers. It's not marbled. It's basically it's got this liquid fat in
yeah.
the muscular tissue, so it's not marbled like we understand it. And
Yeah, yeah.
apparently, it tastes fishy. So your seal actually tastes fishy,
Mm,
and the fat will go rancid really easily. So it will
mm,
go bad if you
ah,
don't eat it fresh, which is why a lot of peoples in the Arctic eat seal raw, fresh,
yeah.
like freshly killed. They eat it raw
Mm,
because if you wait too long, the oil will go rancid. It will go off,
mm,
and apparently it is very unpleasant. It is not a good flavor, and for people coming from a European culinary background, it would have not been a pleasant experience. It would not have been
ah,
something to which you would have looked forward. But by the end of the colony, 80% of their diet was seal.
Jesus. Yeah, different
Yeah.
breed by then, wasn't it? Question in the comments section, they're asking about ivory. Was the majority of it coming from rhino, hippopotamus, or elephants?
Oh, elephant. It was otherwise. Well, I mean, the non-walrus ivory, as far as I know, was majority elephant ivory.
Mm. And
Um,
people asking as well, can you get ivory from rhinos and hippopotamus?
Hippos, no, I don't
Yeah,
think there's hippo ivory. I've
I was
I've been
thinking
up
that.
close and personal with hippos, and I don't remember any protuberance that would be that would be rhinos. Their horns, yeah, and I've seen carved rhino horns. So, but
Mm.
rhinos are not something people generally want to hunt.
Yeah,
Yeah,
bit fierce, all right. Like,
they're pretty. They can be
because I
fierce.
know when I was in Kenya with the military, that's a huge, humongous problem in Kenya. Like you're talking about entire kind of wars kicking off between poachers and the actual Kenyan military over ivory.
Yeah.
Huge, massive market right now, and it's very depressing. I remember when I was in Kenya, like one of the things that we had to go around doing and stuff was actually watch out for poachers. And in one situation, I actually was shot at by a poacher as well. I remember that incident quite well. But yeah, we went in and arrested the poacher, all right. Like, but like the fact that the poacher had the nerve to start shooting at us, like, was absolutely wild with all the gunpowder behind us. And he was a singular individual, by the way. Is like I couldn't figure even today. I was like, why would you do that? Why couldn't you just hide and wait for us to go by and then do your evil business? Why
Right.
why did you hurt us?
Why provoke a firefight, buddy? Like seriously.
Yeah, we like. I mean, we had a huge, massive military behind us. I mean, pretty much the entirety of the Western military force behind us, and the Kenyan military as well. So I remember the bullet going right past my head, and thinking to myself, why would you do that? Like, why would you do that? Like, you would. And I remember every single. I'm talking about big tanks and everything, all aimed directly at him. And I'm thinking to myself, why? Why did you do that? But the Kenyan police went around, they flanked around him and just arrested him. And
Right.
I'm pretty sure all those rifles and stuff pointed at him. He was more than glad to surrender. Like, but I couldn't, even today, like, why would you do that? Like, you know?
Yeah. So yeah,
Um,
we've got Takeda's comment about seal is that it's more like cod liver oil in taste. Yeah, 100%.
mm,
I would not want seal. It is a sign of desperation. They also excavated one farm, Philip, that
yeah,
that 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 disappeared basically towards the end of the colony, and the level of desperation can be read in the report from the excavation, because apparently the farmers or whoever, they slaughtered every single thing on the farm and ate it. Everything. Their livestock, their dogs, everything. And they cut open every single bone and scooped out the marrow. So, and this is, we're talking end 14th century, early 15th century. So it's very clear from the archaeology that the situation had become desperate in terms of like actually getting enough caloric intake that they wanted.
mm,
So I don't, that's unusual to
yeah,
eat your, because if you eat, they slaughtered the babies too. They slaughtered the calves. They slaughtered the lambs. So
mm.
when you're slaughtering the next generation of your livestock, you have reached a really desperate point.
That's not good. Yeah. You see, I can't turn around. This is why didn't they just jump on a boat and sail over to Iceland? But then at the
Well,
same
so
time,
so
go
they
on.
may have, right?
Yeah.
So this is the thing. This might be why because there is no sign of violence. There is no sign of these. The only one of the farmsteads burnt down, but it looks like the typical thing that sometimes happens when you're not careful with
Yeah.
with your with your oil lamps or your rush lights or your torches, right? That's in the pre-modern world, things burnt down quite a bit,
Mm,
as you know. But what they discovered is that there's most of the record, all of the records, because there are no archives, medieval archives in Greenland. So all of
mm,
the records we have, documentary records that we have about Greenland, are either in Iceland or Norway or Denmark,
yeah.
right? Or I probably would have been in Ireland if things hadn't gone up in flames in the 1920s, I guess.
Burn it. Time to make a new country. Whee!
Right. Um, so, but that the last one of the last recorded events is 1408, that wedding at Halsey, right?
Mm.
But do you know why we know about that wedding in at Halsey Church in Greenland in 1408? Do you know why we know about it?
Why do we know? Because people went
How
there
do
and
we
came
know?
back. Because they, what was it? Icelanders went over there and came back.
No,
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 go on.
no, not that at all. It's because the couple that got married moved from Greenland to Iceland in the 1420,
Yeah,
needed to
yeah, that makes
prove
more
that they
sense.
were married.
Yeah.
So in 1420, they talked about having been married in 1408 in Greenland.
Mm,
But that tells you that that's evidence of. I'm like, why has no one just looked at this and said this is probably what everyone else did,
yeah.
right? Like they literally left and moved to Iceland. So my
That's
suspicion is that everyone who was left did the same.
Yeah, that's so funny that you bring that up, actually. Because if I can quickly find the source there on this one, this is actually a hot topic in Ireland right now, right? So, as you said there, the proof of marriage is really important going into the 14th and 15th century. And in Ireland, during the early medieval period, there is so many arguments, and it's women who are pushing these arguments. By the way, is men marrying multiple women, and this is a huge debate and argument right now in Ireland between the medieval circles because they're shocked and surprised by how many partners Irishmen had during the medieval period. Because especially merchants were going to different villages and marrying
The
multiple women. So
woman in every port. Yep.
yes. So what was happening is that, especially Irishmen would go to one to an area for the assemblies and stuff, get himself for a partner for the night, and all you need is witnesses. By the way, so they do. These women do have witnesses. Then they would go over to another settlement for another assembly or what. And they would get themselves another partner because you're in the assembly, you're drinking away and stuff, and so you would party on and you would
Men.
marry another woman. And these women did have witnesses, right? And what would happen is that
Right.
these women would find out that they would have that these men were visiting other women, which is against Christianity, right? I know that there's a argument about concubines and all that kind of stuff. But for the time being, I'm just talking about the regular Irishman. I'm not talking about the Vikings and I'm not talking about certain
Right.
nobles, right, with concubines. Just talking about the regular Irishman, right? So the regular Irishman shouldn't be having concubines and shouldn't be having multiple wives. And what would happen, right, is that these women would go down to the clergy and they would argue with the clergy that this man is married to multiple women. And so the clergy would come over to try to get these men to divorce their wives. They were trying to find out who he was married to first, who he had children with. And this is a
Right.
huge deal, because, especially when it comes down to children, because the fact that if it's proven that he's married to that individual, he has to look after the children that are married in a proper wedlock. If they have a divorce, so it breaks into a divorce then, to the second and third wives, or how many wives that he had, right? Because he also cannot support these, technically speaking, right? Um, those children then are broken away from his kin and have to go back to her family. So she would argue, these women were arguing that they were the first wife, okay?
Yeah.
I do know the noble classes now. People in the comment section will say, "Oh yeah, but there's laws." That was for the noble classes. It was that noble men could have multiple wives in early medieval law in early medieval Ireland, but it was still argued the Christian Church. The Christian Church was still very much against. What was it called? Irishmen having multiple wives.
Polygamy. The word you're looking for
Polygamy.
is
Yeah.
polygamy.
Mm,
I mean, the thing is that the church is. I mean, this is true throughout the whole. The church is a develop. It's not a static institution. It's
yeah.
not like in 412 the church passes a bunch of regulations and that's it for the rest of history, right?
Mm,
The church is constantly evolving, developing. It's also trying to stay up with the times socially,
mm,
also.
Oh yeah.
And so it's, the church, I mean, marriage doesn't even become a sacrament until very late in church history. People assume it's a sacrament throughout the entire Middle Ages. It is not. For most of the Middle Ages, the church stays out.
Mm,
You don't have a religious ceremony to celebrate your marriage. It's a legal agreement. It's an arrangement. It's an exchange of vows.
mm.
So that's the other thing is you can't say, well, in medieval Ireland, noblemen could have multiple wives. Well, what period of medieval Ireland are we talking
Yeah.
about, right? This is not, we're not talking about the Fitzgeralds in the 15th century.
Mm, 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 mm. Yeah, it was. I think it's. Oh yeah, Doctor Sparky Booker. So Doctor Booker in Ireland is arguing right now. She is highlighting the fact that basically the old idea was that Irish people were good Christians. They would never do such a thing like that. But when she was doing Dr. Booker in Ireland
What?
was doing her research, straight away she was finding out like endless amount of sources from Irish women who were arguing and were very much pro. So it was Irish women were very pro marriage, and it was the fact that they needed to look after their children, and it was always a case of what was it called? Have I gone quiet? It also helps
No,
to
I can
keep
hear
the
you.
peace that men can get married. It isn't really good for keeping the peace if all the women can get. Oh yeah, Phil went quiet. Have I gone quite quiet? All women.
No, I can hear
Uh,
you just fine.
yeah,
It went quiet.
Kevin, 100% agree with that as well. It's not good for the community if you just have one man who's snatched up all the women. That
Yeah,
it's
it's
better for
it's
the
an
community for couples to be
yeah.
balanced out. Like
Agreed. And actually, that's another part of the issue with Greenland. So, as they started looking at the gender of the bodies that they were studying, there were fewer and fewer women.
yeah.
And the age of the women, like I was looking at the average ages of the skeletons, and the women were dying mostly in their 20s,
Jesus.
which says to me they were probably dying in childbed. Um, right? Because they probably don't have a preponderance of midwives. The Greenland colony at its height, as far as I can tell, at its height was only 2,500 people. That is not a lot of people.
Mm,
And so they, maybe especially as the numbers started dwindling, it was an exponential decline, because at first you just have a few fewer women, but the knock-on effect of fewer and fewer women is more fewer and fewer women and
yeah.
more fewer and fewer children, full stop.
Mm,
So yeah, the Greenland colony suffered an extreme uh, disproportion of men to women, and that would also show up in why there are native peoples in Greenland who to this day have DNA from that they've traced back to the Norse settlers, the
mm,
Scandinavian settlers, but it's from the male side, not the female side.
yeah. Yeah.
So because there weren't enough women for that,
Mm, mm,
apparently. I mean, if your colony cannot keep women are essential for reproduction, and clearly there wasn't going to be, especially after the Black Death. Why would anyone have an incentive to leave Europe and go to Greenland? Right?
yeah.
The socioeconomic opportunities after the Black Death were plentiful in Europe because of the massive die-off, which left thousands of farms empty and in need of labor, and thousands of jobs empty and in need of labor. So wages go up, economic opportunity goes up. Who is going to leave Europe and go to Greenland? In the end of the no one, no one's going to do that.
Jim asking, you mean there was no medieval license? Sorry, no medieval marriage license in the medieval times? No, and it's a huge problem throughout. I know constantly it's the church. They're trying to, as we go into the early medieval period, it is a case of you have your noble king who has multiple wives, which really annoys the church, and this attitude as well, even going into late medieval period of having a local Taoiseach, which is the chieftain of a clan in the late medieval period, suddenly, having one wife here and then going off down the road and marrying another woman, and then him just, considering, oh, well, that's just another concubine, that's okay. because I'm the Taoiseach, I'm the man. The church hates this kind of attitude, this kind of warlord attitude that's going on with the Irish chieftains, the Taoiseachs and stuff. And it's just not an attitude that the what was it called? The Gaelic Irish do alone. You also have the Anglo Irish as well. They're doing the same attitude as well of having, behaving like a warlord, where they would have marry one wife and then go down the road and marry another woman again. So this is although it's very dominant during the early medieval period, it continues going into the late medieval period as well. Even when the church continues to crack down on this more and more and more, because the church really despises this whole thing of these men taking on this warlord attitude of having a wife here, having a wife down the road, and being like, "Oh well, they're my concubines there, so that's okay."
Right. Yeah. So, interesting. Look at the Lusana and Giovanni case. Oh, yeah. So that's a good point. So, Ryan found while he was while Ryan was back in the U.S. going through secondhand bookstores and looking for gems for elucidating the vicissitudes of medieval daily life, he found this book, this really small book that was focused on a case about a woman in Italy
Mm,
who basically spent years trying to prove that she was married to this man
yeah.
because he was a polygamist and he tried to claim that this other woman was the one, and Giovanna is her name. She spent years going to court, and I think she eventually won.
Mm,
And this was just discovered by accident because this historian was going to the archives to research something entirely differently. And in the course of his research, he kept finding records from in that were part of this bigger overarching case.
Jesus. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So, and that's the 15th century. So, whether or not it's legal, there's and it's generally, at least the cases I've seen of it from the Middle Ages, it tends to be the men who are engaging in the polygamy, not the women. It's not
Yes.
a case
Yeah.
of a woman having multiple husbands
Yeah.
illegally and illicitly. It's a man having multiple wives who don't know about each other.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So,
That's exactly that fits in
yeah,
perfectly with what Dr. Booker is arguing in Ireland right now. That the fact that people were kind of having a more of a free hippie attitude, especially men, when it comes down to marriage, having multiple wives and stuff, where women are constantly trying to be as conservative as possible because of the fact that. They're then trying to defend the rights of not just themselves but their children as well. Because if what was it called, the other women, because they're conspires, they're trying to find their evidence to support their case. If the other women can prove that they are the main wife, that's it, they're booted off. In Ireland, I'm not sure what the case is in Italy. Would he have to pay for all the children, or what's the crack?
yeah. I'm not certain. I haven't gotten to actually. I just got this book, so I haven't had a chance to read it
uh,
yet. Um,
yeah.
but it could be. It would also come down to an issue with inheritance, also.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Because it's in Italy, it's very likely that the man is going to die first,
Yeah.
as long as the woman doesn't die in childbed.
Yes.
Provided that the woman does not die in childbed, it is
Mm,
likely that the man is going to die first. And so it's important that the widow have provisions, therefore,
mm,
not just for the children, but for herself. So,
yeah.
you know, that they're speaking of the church and marriage. So a lot of people don't realize that medieval Greenland, converted to Christianity at about the same time that kind of the rest of the Scandinavian world converted, and that they
Mm.
actually had a cathedral and a bishop as of the
Oh,
12th century. Yeah,
okay. That's very interesting.
yeah. So there was a cathedral and there was a bishop. There were multiple churches. So it was fully integrated into that system,
Mm,
and it was apparently monitored by the episcopacy in Iceland. So that's kind of where they reported to.
mm,
So they actually, for that, when they've excavated around the cathedral where the bishop lived, what they found is that the bishop was living pretty well.
mm,
Uh, the bishop didn't have to eat seal, in case you
mm.
were wondering. The bishop,
Okay.
or he didn't have to eat seal until the end. Towards the end, his he 30% of his diet became seal.
Okay.
But but for the most part, the bishop was still had access to beef and goat and lamb or sheep, right? He was
Mm,
still He was caribou. That caribou was also a big one,
Yeah.
which is basically reindeer. So the bishop was living pretty well. The upper levels of society were still getting access to actual meat in Greenland instead of seal blubber and
Mm.
seal meat. But even they, as you get closer to the 15th century, even for them, the percentage of seal goes up. So, but I what has been interesting to me reading up on the archaeology, because a lot of this doesn't get published, doesn't get pushed out there, is just how sophisticated the Greenland colony actually was. So, did you know
Yeah.
that they had bedsteads made from walrus ivory? So
That's
they
showing
actually,
off now, isn't it?
right?
Yeah.
I mean, in Europe that would be a luxury. For them, it's their primary material.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they had full weaving workshops. In fact, in one of the weaving workshops that they excavated, they actually found evidence that they were weaving in fibers other than wool, than goat and sheep's wool, sheep's
But
hair. They were
Rachel, I don't
actually
know what you're
weaving.
talking about. They didn't have any clothes, remember?
Oh, I know, right? They just wore drafty whatever, right? And they
Yeah.
didn't adapt. They didn't adapt at
Yeah.
all, right?
Yeah.
Which is why the fabric remnants that they found that actually contained bear hair and
Mm.
caribou hair clearly are a fiction, right? That's
Yes. Yes.
fake
Yes.
news.
Yes.
Fake
Who
news.
was, and do you remember what the name of the person that made that argument that they didn't have, was a good clothing for Greenland?
Yeah, what was it? The channel's name is the something Pharaoh. The something Pharaoh.
Oh, well,
I'll have to
straight
look it
away.
up. It
It
was
sounds like an AI name.
yeah. No, 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 no. I mean, I think based on the video, it's definitely not AI.
Hmm.
The video that I watched was
Because anyway.
surprisingly well put together and didn't use any fucking AI imagery.
Oh, it's even
So,
worse than that. Yeah. It's worse than the fact that people will take it more seriously if it looks really good, because that
yeah.
was my argument with. I think the show's like really good. I think it's called Medieval Maps or something like that. But it did an episode on Ireland, and oh, it was absolutely diabolical. Basically, it was the fact that the English had came to Ireland in the 12th century to civilize the uncivilized, Irish people, and then it kind of went from there all the way up to the 15th century and stuff. It being, Ireland being a successful colony of England since the 12th century. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, this is like, imagine turning around to this guy. Like, this was insanely pro English. And I was there thinking to myself, you're talking about the period of the Anjou Empire when Henry II was giving his, what was it called? His, tribute and stuff over to the King of France. Granted, there's a lot of friction there between Henry II and the King of France, but my point being is that Henry II, a part of the quote unquote Anjou Empire, was very much part of the French realm. He wasn't
Oh
English
yeah.
the way this
He,
guy
he was
was
he was he was
talking like.
he was he was culturally French.
Yeah.
I mean, as French as anyone in France is in the 12th century,
Mm.
um, which is to say, there definitely was, a French. Oh, darn it! What did I do there? There definitely was a what I would call a French culture in the 12th and 13th century. It isn't what we would identify as French now,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, but he was French speaking even. I mean,
Mm.
it, one of the greatest women authors of England, in the sense that she was writing in England and at the English court, is
Mm.
a French woman from the 12th century, Marie de France. Right?
Yeah.
She is born in England, but she is part of the English court. She's writing under Henry II, but she's writing in French. She's not writing
Yeah.
in English.
But
So
that's one of my problems when people recognize William Marshall as one of the greatest English knights of all time.
yeah,
And I'm like, okay, yeah, fair enough. He was born in Dover, but he spent most of his childhood in Normandy in France. And then from Normandy in France, he moved over to, what was it called? Over to the Anjou area. Like he spent a good chunk of his youth living in France, and even when he was in England, he was a part of the French world, the French speaking
right.
world in England at the time.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't even I have
100%.
I don't know any evidence of him being able to speak any form of Anglo-Saxon. when he was in England. I do know he would have been able to speak Irish because of the fact he had, after he'd married Isabel de Clare, he would have had to interact with pretty much the entire community of Kilkenny and stuff. So he most likely, in his older part of his life, been able to speak Irish. Especially when the older nobles of the Irish Parliament at the time, such as Richard More de Burgh and Henry, what was it? Hugh de Lacy, the junior, whose mother was an O'Connor, and also, by the way, Richard More de Burgh, his mother was an O'Brien. So these were all Irish-speaking French nobles inside of the Irish Parliament, well, the Irish Assembly at the time. So Marshall being able to interact with them, I think he would have been able to at least pick up phrases and stuff of Irish. But I don't know of any evidence of him being able or needing to be able to speak any form of Anglo-Saxon. To be honest with you,
I
perhaps
have
like maybe
very
somebody has
little,
evidence on
yeah,
it. Yeah,
I have very little evidence of English aristocracy. I have no evidence actually of
yeah,
English aristocracy from that era being able to speak any form of so-called English.
yeah,
Um, now that doesn't mean they didn't. I just haven't seen it because all the literature is in French. Their
yeah.
communications are in French or Latin. Yeah. So there's a question here from Susan. Are there any pictures of the Greenland clothing artifacts besides Herjolfsness?
Mm,
I have not seen any. No, that's not true. I've seen a picture of the little square of wool that has bear fur in it,
mm,
but I don't. That was in an archaeological report. Have I seen it published in any book? No. Um,
mm.
but I think that's because. Are you familiar with the clothing from Herjolfsness?
I'm
That
literally looking at it now. It's so I'm
yeah.
okay. So I'm assuming this is for a woman, is it? This outfit.
Well, no, it could be for a man.
Okay.
It depends on which one you're looking at because they found both
Yeah.
men's and women's clothing. The thing is that
Yeah.
the
I
men
see
were
that.
also wearing long clothing. Why
Mm,
would men be wearing long clothing when it's bloody cold out, Philip? Why would
yeah.
you do that? Why would why would men want to wear long clothes just because it's cold out? They should definitely show their legs because
Mm,
you can't be too effeminate in Greenland. It's more important to make sure people know you're manly. So
mm,
that
mm.
no, men were also wearing long garments, very
Yeah.
long garments,
What was it
because
called? It's Phelim O'Connor's effigy. It
yeah,
reminds
yeah,
me of Phelim
yeah,
O'Connor's effigy, the way it's nice and long tunic.
yes,
That's very interesting. I'll have to keep an
that's
eye on that one.
that's why when I was saying that if I were doing Irish medieval clothing,
Mm,
which we are, but if I were right now doing it, if I were making an outfit, I would look to the few potentially medieval garments we have from Ireland, but I would also honestly look at the way things are being done in ice and Greenland,
yeah.
um, for construction ideas and techniques, because depending on where you are in Ireland, there could definitely be a connection there, but also there could be similar circumstances in the availability of materials
Mm,
and whatnot. But yeah, I know the effigy of which you're speaking, and it looks so very much like those garments, doesn't it?
yeah. Yeah. It's
But
crazy. Like
and
because the
but
moment that
that garment that you're looking at dates to the 15th century.
oh
King O'Connor is way before that, which highlights what I was saying about the Greenland colony not being up to date on the latest and greatest fashions. They were not. They couldn't afford to be. And the kinds of clothes that people for fashionable Philip, think about the mayor of Wexford, the mayors of Wexford, Limerick, Waterford, and Dublin. Think
yeah.
about the depiction of them, right? They're wearing these really tight fitted garments. One of them has something that goes down to his ankles, but the rest of them, they come down to about mid thigh.
Mm.
Imagine wearing that in Greenland during the Little Ice Age.
Yeah, a bit cold, wouldn't it? It wouldn't
Would
be
be
the
a bit
most
cold.
comfortable. Yeah, yeah.
Would not. And the thing about cloaks, people have mentioned cloaks. Depending on the kind of cloak, no matter what, a cloak is a little awkward for
Mm,
actually doing things,
yeah.
right? If you actually need to be working, if you need to be using your arms, if you need to be moving and being agile with your body, no, most any kind of cloak is going to get in your way. So
Mm,
to stay warm while working, you can't really be wearing a cloak. You need to be wearing layers of garments that actually more or less fit to the shape of your body so
mm.
that the garments move with you. I mean, think about trying to chop wood with a cloak.
Yeah,
You're
yeah,
probably going to chop your cloak
yeah,
just as
yeah.
much as anything, right? Think about hunting with a cloak. You're probably going to get your arrows tied up in your cloak as you try to pull them from the quiver at your waist, right? It's
Mm,
cloaks are dramatic and they look sexy, but they're not really the most practical garment for anything except for riding on horseback, honestly.
mm.
In my if you're just walking. If you're
Yeah.
just walking and you don't need to actually use your arms for anything, then cloaks are great. But the second you need to use your arms, what do you do with the cloak?
Or just take it
Your
off,
arm,
especially with the pin
right,
comes off. It's gone.
right, right. You have to take your arms. You either have to take the cloak off or you have to take your arms out of your cloak, which means you're no longer warm.
Mm.
So, yeah.
Think about how much trouble I would have if I had to deliver mail with the cloak. It has to be freezing out there. Maybe a cloak would be better. I don't know. Maybe a bit,
Yeah,
maybe
I
a
think
bit difficult.
I think fitted layers made of wool and lined in fur is just a way better plan. And that's
Mm-hmm.
people are always asking me, well, what kinds of cloaks did women wear in this era? And I'm like, they mostly didn't,
Yeah.
because your top layer is lined in fur, and
Mm.
that's it. And you wear something to cover this, and you're good. You're golden. You're set to go.
Somebody asked as well, what about the influences into Scotland? Do you know any influences from Greenland and Iceland into Scotland?
Yeah, that's really interesting because like the Orkneys and the Faroes,
Oh yeah.
right? The Faroes are actually part of. I don't know if they still are, but they
Mm.
used to be part of the Kalmar Union, right? They used to be
Yeah.
under Norway and then kind of Denmark, Norway, Sweden. I don't know if they still are actually. I
I
should.
think they're still are part of Denmark
Yeah,
and stuff because
right.
there's always
So
arguments between the United Kingdom and Denmark, isn't there?
right,
I know
right,
America.
and the Orkneys have kind of been back and forth a little bit.
Yeah.
So if you consider that to be part of Scotland, then
Mm.
yes. But no, I'm not. I'm not familiar with any solid connection between Scotland and Greenland in that sense. Whereas Ireland
Mm.
has Galway, right, which is like Greenland.
Yeah.
It's Greenland facing. It looks towards Greenland.
Yeah.
It's a Greenland facing port. So that's
Yeah.
that's why I feel like that is much more likely to have those connections there. Not
Oh
that
yeah, big
not
time.
that Scotland is impossible. I just it's not as likely as the Ireland Greenland connection because of Galway.
Yeah, it's very fascinating because there was definitely a connection between, especially going up to the 13th century, between Denmark and Norway for sure.
Right.
I know they get a bit tick with each other after the Scottish Norwegian War, but I think after that marriage alliance, it's not too bad. But I think, yeah, especially going up to the 14th century, there does seem to be a good connection between Norway and Denmark. But I think going into the Hundred Years' War, and you can correct me on this, I think Scotland looks more and more to France just because of their hatred towards England. I'm not sure what their relationship is going into the 15th and 16th century when it comes down to
Well, it's
Scotland
it's
and Norway and
it's
that.
got to be pretty good with Denmark because Princess Margaret marries James III and becomes Queen of Scotland
Oh,
in
yeah,
in
yeah,
in
yeah.
the second half of the 15th century. She's one of the
Mm.
few Scottish queens from the Middle Ages of whom we actually have a proper portrait. So
Oh, good.
yeah, yeah, her altarpiece. She and James actually have Hugo van der Goes comes up and paints
Mm.
from the Flanders comes up and paints an altarpiece for them. So
Yeah.
yeah, so there definitely are still some good ties by the 15th century between Scotland and Denmark. So it's all
Oh, big time.
nice-ish by then. There was a question I thought I saw. Oh yeah, Twitchy says short capes were very popular in the 19th century for certain professions, but at that point they had hand slits. Yeah, and
Mm.
it's not to say that cloaks were never worn in the Middle Ages. That's patently not true. They had very ceremonial uses, and if you're riding a horse, then a cloak is a good thing because it can kind of surround you and a little bit of the horse, and it keeps your saddle dry and it keeps you dry, right? But when you're riding a horse, all you need is your hands to poke out enough, and not even you can actually bring those reins inside the cloak just fine.
Yeah.
So there were uses. It just wasn't. You just didn't have people wandering around in cloaks all the time. That's why you never see them in art. So everyone's like, "Where are the
Yeah.
cloaks?" Like, well, they're depicted on dead people because those are their ceremonial royal cloaks. Um,
Mm. I think it depends on the era, though, because in Ireland at least they do go cloak mad in the ninth, 10th, and somewhere around the 11th century and stuff. But as you said there, like there's so many things. The moment they start doing anything like farming or fighting or anything, there's no cloak to be seen. Like it seems to be, that classic depiction. The high middle, the very start of the high Middle Ages when they're in the court and
Right.
they're all like pretty much stick figures, and they all have that little cloak on them and
Yeah.
stuff. I think that's the only time I start to see them getting depicted in Ireland, at least, and I think in England as well. Just with the arrival of the Normans and stuff, but then after that, the cloaks do seem to completely disappear. But as you said there, it's more coats and stuff as well start to appear in longer tunics and
Yeah,
stuff, if I'm not
yeah,
mistaken.
it's layers, right? And your top layer is lined
Yeah,
in fur. So, and again, I'm not saying that cloaks don't have a function. When you're just out and about walking, it's fine because you're not doing
yeah,
anything. But the second you start doing something, you want to be wearing layers that are warm enough to still keep you warm while you do the thing. So if you're relying on your
mm,
cloak alone for warmth, you're going to be real unhappy the second you get active because off comes
yeah,
the cloak, and then what you're wearing is not sufficient. That's that's my point. And cloaks kind of go in and out of fashion. In the
yeah, no
16th
doubt.
century, we get these, you with the little ice age coming on. People are basically like, well, maybe it's not important that I be able to use my arms. Maybe I'm just going to swaddle myself in a head to toe cloak. Like in Poland, we see this. We see the Polish women literally wearing these really weird cloaks where they've got this standing collar that goes up to their eyes. I'm not exaggerating.
Oh,
And it completely covers
yeah,
their face and around the backs of their head. And then it's tied here at the neck, and then the cloak goes all the way to the ground.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like something of Dracula, Principality of Wallachia. I wonder if there's an influence there and stuff. Because anytime you see depictions of Count Dracula and stuff, you've kind of got that image in my head,
Oh
or am
well,
I completely
that's
wrong?
you're looking at a 19th century. That's a 19th century cloak. That's the one Twitchy was
Ah,
mentioning. The gentlemen were wearing these dramatic cloaks in the 19th
yeah,
century,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
Ah, right, right, right. Gotcha, 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 gotcha. Somebody was just saying in the comment section there, love Galway. Yeah, isn't Galway 1,000 times better than Dublin? Everyone always goes to Ireland and they just go to Dublin and forget the real Irish experience, especially more now than ever that Ireland is, sorry, Dublin has become proper Eurofied and stuff. If you want a real delicious chunk of Galway, sorry, Ireland, you have to go to Galway. Galway and Kerry. If you want the proper like city kind of Irish atmosphere, I'd say go to Galway and definitely go to one of the pubs in Galway. Like, oh, Rachel, people in Galway are just so insanely friendly.
Oh,
Like, you could be sitting
oh,
there with a pint and just start talking to the person next to you. In Dublin, they'll tell you to feck off. They will hear your American accent and tell you, get lost, you're not one of us. In Galway, oh, they're so friendly. They're the nicest people in the whole world. So many times, so many Americans come up to me and say, "Oh, I went to Ireland. The people were so rude." And I was like, "Where did you go?" I went to Dublin. And I were like, "Well, you went to Dublin. What do you expect? It's proper Euro Ireland. Like, I wouldn't call it Ireland, Ireland, especially for the friendliness.
well,
Go to Galway and Kerry.
Galway's a smaller city than Ireland or than Dublin, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Oh, big time.
Dublin
Yeah.
has big city syndrome. I mean,
Yeah.
this is like
Yes.
people when people say, "Oh, the French are snobby and unfriendly," it's because they've been to Paris, right? Or if they
Yeah.
say Americans are unfriendly, it's because they've been in New York, right?
Mm.
It is a common Seoul. People in Seoul are not terribly friendly, but down here in Daegu,
Mm.
they're super friendly, right? So
Yeah.
it's this big city syndrome, and it's the large concentration of people just seems to make humans grumpy. So
Yeah. Yeah.
so I
Yeah.
would, yeah, but
Oh,
good travel tip. I'll be telling people to go to Cork or Galway and to eschew Dublin. Although the National Museum in Dublin is a must visit.
yes,
Yeah,
yes,
it
you
is.
do have to go there as
You have to
well.
go
I
there.
would say, especially during the day, go to Christchurch, up around the Christchurch area. Avoid Temple Bar because go in there for an old look. Do not buy a pint in Temple Bar. Do not buy food in Temple Bar. Do not
do
interact. Well,
not
go in there for an
don't,
old nosy.
Don't
but
interact.
go around Temple Bar as much as possible, right? Go over to Trinity and to see the Book of Kells and the, what was it called? The National Museum of Ireland is up around Trinity as well.
Yeah,
And just before you get the train down to Cork, which my your comment section actually points out is the real capital, it
yeah.
is. Um, just before you take the train, on the right side of a train, there's another Irish National Museum. It's not the National Museum of Archaeology, that's next to Trinity University, but next to the train station, there is a National Military Museum. Go inside there, it is absolutely fantastic and amazing. So definitely go inside
Nice.
there before you take your train ride down to Cork and Galway and all those other places as well, and Limerick, right? But I wouldn't even get a hotel in Dublin unless it's slightly outside, which is, what was it, Clontarf Castle, but that's outside Dublin City. I wouldn't even bother because you're not getting the real Irish experience.
Yeah,
You know, you're
yeah,
getting Europe's interpretation of the Irish experience, which is plastic. It's not
yeah.
real.
No, it is. It is. It is
I
very sad what Dublin has become.
mm, I should it's the same everywhere with cities modernization. It's the same thing in Tokyo now as well.
Oh God, I
Like
can't
if you
do
want the real,
Tokyo, man. It makes me. Tokyo makes my skin crawl. I have my skin crawl. I have an issue with crowds, which is why I
yeah,
can't
yeah,
do most
oh,
concerts. And
yeah,
like the trendy parts of Tokyo, I am everywhere else but there. I
mm,
cannot handle it. And there's so many nicer parts of Japan. I love going to
yes,
just the small random towns and cities and just walking around and seeing how people live their lives. And going to a random ramen lunch counter, right?
yeah.
And watching the Japanese
Ramen
inhale
in
their
Tokyo is
ramen.
terrible. Yeah. Ramen in Tokyo is
Yeah.
terrible.
No.
Go out way over to the Kyoto area. Not so much Kyoto itself, but the areas, especially the villages in between Kyoto and stuff. Wow, the ramen, the food. It's a million. Tokyo food is pure plastic food. There's a few spots, but when you do find a few, those few spots, it's going to cost you an arm and a leg.
Yeah.
It literally costs that you could it out in the middle of nowhere. Just as you're going to some of the historical sites, you'll find ramen shops just off from it. Oh my god, they will charge you an entire meal that they would charge in Tokyo for $100. They would charge you $5 for the same meal, and it's a billion times better.
Yeah.
And it's made by local people who are just insanely amazing with food. I wouldn't spend obviously go in there Tokyo to get the experience over and done with, but I wouldn't spend long in
Yeah.
Tokyo.
Over,
And there's just,
over,
as you said there,
over and done with is the perfect way to phrase it.
yeah, there's a billion other better places to go to. From Nagoya, my main spots I would go to was okay. So Osaka, that's also very very packed. I love Osaka to be
But I
honest with
love
you,
no. But
but
Osaka is a small big city, right? So it's
yeah,
not everywhere. There's so many quiet historic neighborhoods in Osaka where there's no people. I mean, there are people
yeah,
in the homes, I guess, because the houses are occupied, but but there's no one out and about. You can go to the temple neighborhoods in Osaka where all the beautiful
yes,
historic Shinto temples are, and it's so quiet. Osaka Castle,
mm,
okay, she's crazy packed.
yeah,
Specifically near the
it
keep.
is.
But the good thing about Osaka Castle is that it's like Central Park, where it's got these
Mm,
massive grounds. And I've been to
yeah,
places in the Osaka Castle grounds where there were no other humans within 1,000 feet to be seen. So,
mm, yeah.
yeah,
Oh yeah, that's a fact as well. I would stay around the area from Osaka, Kyoto, and where my wife is from in Nagoya. That whole triangle area there, I would stay around that spot there, especially the small villages in between. And as long as you speak a little bit of Japanese, all you need to know is a tiny bit to kind of navigate your way around, and also to be able to thank people afterwards. And voila, people will not think you're a jerk. If you go in there to areas and demand stuff and you're doing it in English, of course, people are going to think you're a jerk. But wow, like the moment you start speaking Italian, make an effort. If you're seen making an effort to local people and you say thank you in Japanese, which is arigato gozaimasu, if you say that, don't be lazy in saying arigato. You've got some like cheeky tourists saying, "Oh, I'm just like one of the locals." I heard one of the locals saying arigato. You're not. You're not. You're a tourist. So it has to be arigato gozaimasu. Um, the moment you say arigato gozaimasu, oh my god, like people will literally break their back to help you out and stuff. But at the same time, you have to remember that whole area has been abused by endless amount of tourists
Yeah,
that
this
think Japan's a roller coaster.
Japan is suffering big time from over tourism right now. So
Yeah.
it's can the Contessa please show what she's working on? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I've got two things that I'm working on in honor of Greenland and the garments that definitely did not lead to the failure of the colony. Jesus Christ. Okay. Um, so this is actually a sleeve cuff. This will actually be the lining of the sleeve for an overgown, though a Burgundian style overgown. So we'll actually the sleeve will come up and around it, and then when I fold the sleeve back, which I will when I want to use my hands for something practical, then this is the cuff. This will be a cuff. This is what you'll see when I fold the sleeve back. So it's silk velvet.
Nice.
And then the other thing I'm working on is Philip, what is the eternal thing that reenactors are doing with their kit?
Oh, I don't know. What am I doing wrong?
Fixing it.
Am
You
I
should
doing
be
this as well?
fixing your kit.
Oh,
The thing,
yeah,
the thing
yeah,
we are
yeah, yeah,
always doing is fixing our kit. Our kit is
yeah. Of
constantly in
course.
need of maintenance and repair, right? So this
Yeah.
is actually a medieval. Speaking of stockings, the Greenlanders women wore stockings like this, made of wool. Okay,
What? No way.
this comes up to your knee, and it's held on
Mm.
by a garter. Men were wearing stockings that went all the way up and were tied onto their breeches, which are
Oh,
boxer
really?
shorts. Yeah. So
Mm.
so they were wearing, and there is evidence of null-bound socks, as we were saying. So null binding. Do you know what null binding is, Philip?
Oh, I have seen this. This is where they get the old sewing kit out and they start kind of sewing it together, isn't it?
Well, so,
And they start.
hole.
Oh no.
So got to patch the hole. So null binding is basically single needle knitting. It's the earliest
Yeah.
kind of knitting. It's
Mm.
it's and it is a Scandinavian, as far as we can tell. It's mostly a Scandinavian thing, and the
Mm.
Scandinavians basically use this technique to make these really thick, stretchy socks, basically, and they would wear
Yeah.
them inside of the stocking. So you would put your
Mm.
sock inside the stocking, and then so your foot is extra warm and protected, and then the stocking actually goes all the way up and over your knee. We have no evidence of null bound. I've not seen any evidence of null bound stockings that go all the way up to the knee. It seems it was a multi-layer
Mm.
effect, which makes
Yeah.
sense because multi layers equals better insulation. So
Mm.
yeah.
It's so funny that we're trying to find all this stuff when this stuff may have been made during the early medieval period. Even somebody just messing around with extra stuff and stuff. And now we're trying to go around of this, and if we don't find evidence of it, oh well, it clearly never happened and stuff. It's just kind of funny how like somebody could have made it during the early medieval period, and if they knew we were chasing after this, they'd be like, "Oh, I preserve that." But because they thought when they were making this stuff or throwing this stuff away, they were taught nobody would ever want this in a million years. It's just funny, looking
But it's
at the time.
right. And I mean, the reality is that certainly nothing, very little was thrown away in the Middle Ages, which
Mm,
is why it's strange that we have middens. Most things just got recycled and upcycled until they disintegrated.
yeah.
So we don't, things didn't survive because there wasn't an excess in order to, an excess um, of goods to dispose of. Unlike us, where we're desperately trying to Marie Kondo our homes, right? That
Mm,
was not a pre-modern problem.
yeah.
Ursula says nail binding was done in Egypt too. I thought it was two needle knitting that was done in Egypt, Ursula, but I'm not an expert on the. I'm kind of tangentially aware of what was going on in Egypt with the early knit goods. I always thought it was two needle knitting, but I could definitely be wrong about that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
This puts me in mind of a word that I guess is Gaelic, the cut and sewn hosen that Highland Scottish men wore up to the early 19th century, I think. more comfortable than one would think. Yeah, so men were wearing this host, the Coptic stitch was nail binding. See, I always thought it was two needle knitting all this time. Well,
Hmm.
knitting is not my. I actually know how to do nail binding. I actually don't know how to knit. That's one of the few textile arts I haven't tried.
Hmm.
Um, just because everyone does it, and I just don't like to be like everyone else. So these, this idea of these stockings, right, being for men and women wore them through most of the latter part of the Middle Ages. It seems everyone across almost all of Western
Hmm.
Europe was wearing them. So yeah, they are quite comfy. And the nice thing is they're adjustable. So if it gets hot, you can roll them down and just use
Hmm.
your garters to keep them around your knees.
That's interesting. And is that heavy? I'm talking about the one second. The Coda. Is that because it said I had to look that up there because we don't have that word in Ireland. It's a Scottish word, and it's for the tartan cloak that women have. This is what Google's saying, by the way, not me. And I just find that interesting. Is that because it looks very light in? It looks like a woolly cloak, but I'm just wondering, is it light woolly cloak or a heavy woolly cloak that you see with the brat and stuff? Because that's very interesting. Seems to be just a because the versions I can only see online is the 19th century, so I'm not even sure if they had them during the medieval period or
It,
go
it's
on.
not a garment I've seen referenced in the sources about Scottish fashion history,
Mm.
which but it could also be a question of, I mean, Scotland was very well connected. Guys, medieval Scotland was very well connected to medieval Europe. People seem to think that because it's north of England that they were just off on
Ah,
their own. They weren't.
just used for hose as well. Let me quickly look up that one. Yeah, go crazy looking up stuff there, guys,
Yeah,
because
really.
I'm fascinated by this. Uh,
Yeah, I thought the codice, maybe that DH is a sus
Let me
is a
look up the.
foreign sound. Um, it's the
Say,
word for the hose.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm not. I've if you look at the few
Ada.
depictions of medieval people from Scotland, they don't look different from the people in Europe, in the rest of Europe. They're not depicted as being very differently dressed. And the archaeology from places like Glasgow shows that, at least definitely in that part of the world, and Perth, not just Glasgow, Perth and Glasgow, that's 14th century Scotland, for instance, because those are the digs I'm thinking of specifically, show that they were importing goods from mainland Europe, like fashion items.
Yeah.
Women were wearing these ornate hairnets that were being made in what is now Germany, for instance. So
It's interesting because, like, where in England and France, we have a very much a city versus country clash going on. In Scotland and Ireland, it seems to be very much a city and kind of countryside. Let me go into further detail about that in a second, right? So we have in Ireland, we have Dublin, Cork, Waterford, Limerick, which has the Anglo-Irish fashion, okay, that dominates those spots. And then
right,
in Scotland, we have like Glasgow, Edinburgh, we have the lowland areas that seem to dominate the fashion and stuff. But in Ireland, you have the northwest of the island, the wild Irish country areas. And then in Scotland, we have the Highlands, the more northern areas and that seems to take on more of a country Gaelic fashion, which I find very interesting. And it's also interesting in the fact that those areas are also ones that may have been influenced by Norway, Iceland, and Greenland. That there
right,
seems to
yeah,
be even into like as you said there, Galway. Although Galway does have Anglo-Irish fashion, there's still a connection there between Greenland, Iceland, going to Galway. Even as far as the 15th century, with Christopher Columbus talking to the fishermen who go up to Iceland and the Greenland areas and stuff. So even going into late medieval period, where there may have been a disconnection between Norway and Denmark, there, what was it? Galway still seems to be somewhat connected to Greenland and even perhaps even over to Vinland and those areas and stuff. Maybe.
Oh, so you said something that triggered an interesting an interesting story that I think people will find an interesting story that people will find interesting. Whew, boy, I can word.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I've heard that as well.
so people often ask us. So at some point in our live streams, generally someone brings up witches, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about medieval life. And one of the big differences in the prosecution and persecution of witches in Scandinavia seems to be that men were just as likely, if not more likely, to be brought up on charges of witchcraft than women. And in Greenland, this is true. In 1407, one of the last three things to be recorded about Greenland. In 1407, a man is burned at the stake as a witch for having used black magic, not just any magic, mind you. This is not He's not just out there making flowers grow pretty. He's accused of using black magic to seduce the wife of another man.
Oh, no, that is
Yeah,
interesting.
right. And he is charged, and he is executed by fire. And this is recorded again in the archives in Iceland.
Mm, mm, mm.
So, um, so yes, apparently, even in the very sparsely populated and no doubt failing colony in Greenland, they were still concerned about black magic. And but they apparently were egalitarian about it because they burnt a man at the stake instead of a woman. So
Mm.
once again, the idea of thousands upon thousands of women being burned at the stake for witchcraft in the Middle Ages is a myth. We have I have more evidence, honestly, of men being burned at the stake than women because the Templars all got burned for being witches.
Yeah,
Um,
didn't they? Yeah, yeah,
the,
that's
sor-
interesting. All right.
the sorcerers. Now, I mean, we can all agree that was definitely a frame job, and I think everyone knew they weren't really witches. But um,
Mm.
there were sorcerers involved in a potential assassination case in the court of Henry the Fourth, I think, or Henry the Fourth. Six, where the men were the ones of royal of one of the a duchess was accused of being a witch of not necessarily being a witch but of performing witchcraft, but it was her male accomplices who actually got executed for it.
Mm.
So yeah, but yeah, Greenland,
It's
they're still worried about black magic.
Yeah, it's interesting though because in Ireland it's actually women who are persecuted. You have Ellis Kettler and her maid, but the conspiracy behind that is because Irish women, which is actually true, and we're finding more and more research. It was Emily Little, Dr. Emily Little, who was doing research into the likes of Gráinne O'Malley and what was it, Joan Fitzgerald and stuff, and she noticed that it was Joan Fitzgerald. If you look at the work and the literature of Joan Fitzgerald, she hates English men so much.
What is the era of this?
So
What years
uh,
roughly?
the 16th century is Joan Fitzgerald,
Okay.
and she documents how she hates and despises English men in England, by the way, not Anglo-Irish men. She loves Anglo-Irish and Gaelic. She doesn't love them, right? She prefers them, and the reason why she prefers them is because they allow her to become much more independent. Um, Anglo-Irish women and Gaelic women were very much involved with the administration of many settlements in the medieval period, and that's going from the early medieval period all the way up to the late medieval period. But with the coming of the Englishmen and Joan Fitzgerald in the 16th century, around 1540 up to around 1560, 1570, moans and complains about these Englishmen coming into Ireland because Englishmen think a woman's place is, I wouldn't say in the kitchen per se, but not doing the administration and taking the charge that they should be. You know, a woman has a place in society. And Joan, for her sins, ends up marrying an Englishman, one of the most famous Englishmen in English history. He's your man who has the patch. He's a very close friend to Henry VIII. Um, Joan Fitzgerald ends up marrying him, and by God, does she hate and despise him with every bone in her body. She truly hates the man. And she, like in all of her letters and writings, you know, she despises her husband, hates the Englishmen, hates the way they behave, absolutely despises it. And then, what was it? Dr. Emily Little then does what was it called? Oh God, a comparison to Grania O'Malley. and the way her husbands treat her, and the way she divorces her husband. She marries multiple times, Grace O'Malley does. I can't remember what the reason
Yeah,
was
she's
for her
she's she's
divorce.
a wild one.
Oh, she's
Grace
brilliant.
is.
Yeah, I absolutely love Grace O'Malley. But it is true, if you do a comparison to Grace O'Malley and the way Grace O'Malley's been treated in the medieval world, especially between Anglo Irishmen like the De Burghs, and then the way that Grace O'Malley's treated within the Gaelic society, Grace O'Malley clearly has much more. I wouldn't say like she's living in a complete, equal society, but she clearly lives in a better, world than Joan Fitzgerald is living with her English husband, and the way she's constantly moaning about him, which is very interesting in itself.
Yeah. So
But
let's see. So, oh yeah, go on, go on.
my main point being is the witch trials that happen in the 14th century, where you have Ellis Kettler and you also have her maid who was burned at the stake. They believe that the reason why those two women were burned and also charged by English men was because these English men were trying to get rid of Irish women's what's it called? The control that Irish women had within the administration. They had too much independence because Ellis Kettler was very much involved with the money and the finances of Kilkenny at the time, and also the trade finances that were happening in the
Mm,
wider world. And they
yeah.
feel that a lot of people, because some of these clergy members that were trying to charge her, they were coming in from France and stuff as well. So a lot of people believe they were trying to get rid of
Yeah.
her because she was a woman.
So that sounds so much like the reason the Templars, not because they were women, but it's
Yeah.
it's basically why the Templars were accused of witchcraft and burnt at the stake for witchcraft, right? It's got nothing to do with anything they did or that they were sorcerers or witches. They weren't.
Yeah.
It's because they had power and money,
Mm.
right? So it was in the Middle Ages, as far any of these cases of people being burned at the stake, except for this dude in Greenland who basically gets burned at the stake for adultery when it comes down to it. Except for him, more of the cases that I've read are about people in positions of power being removed from power via this accusation of witchcraft, right?
Yeah.
But it's not, again, it's still not the thousands of women that people believe were burnt at the stake for witchcraft in the Middle Ages. They weren't. That's
Mhm.
the 17th century, and they were mostly hanged.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's not. It's this weird anti-Catholic sentiment that it really hit its stride. Twitchy may correct me, in like the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries when that stuff really started going around. But
Mm-mm.
yeah,
Yeah. Did Grace O'Malley marry multiple times? Right. Allegedly, she did marry and had multiple husbands. Allegedly, but as we were saying before, it could be down to the fact that what was it called? As we were saying, there it's difficult to document these people who are having a husband here and a husband there, especially the way that Grace O'Malley was hopping on her boat and just going here, there, and everywhere, right? So
right,
allegedly, she did have multiple husbands, including a young lover. Okay,
right.
her official husband is Donald O'Flaherty, is one of her husbands, and
Her
then
official
she
husband.
divorces him, I'm sure, and she marries Richard the Iron Burke, right? And she also divorces him. I remember that divorce because of the fact that that's the famous divorce where she goes into he goes off right on a raid and stuff. She goes over and takes his castle, right? She physically takes his castle while he's away. And they're married, by the way, and he doesn't know this is happening. She physically takes his castle, goes up to the top of the castle, and starts throwing his stuff out of the window. He comes back and sees her throwing his stuff out of the window, and she's roaring out of the window all sorts of abuse at him. And she's basically declaring that she's moved all of her stuff into his castle and is now taking and occupying his castle. That's the famous divorce case. I don't know how they ends up divorcing. It definitely didn't, go
So
right after she had physically taken his castle.
so I have a friend who actually did that to his ex fiancee
Oh
after
my,
he found out she had cheated on him.
yeah.
He went home. He tossed. This is here in Korea. He tossed all of her stuff, and when I say into the street, I mean the street. I don't mean the sidewalk. I mean it was being run over by cars. He tossed all of her stuff
Oh,
out the window into the street. changed the locks, and told her, never come back. So apparently he. I don't know if you ever heard of Grace O'Malley doing that, but it's a popular way to end a relationship.
For sure, like. And why did Joan marry? I can't remember his bloody name. I'll quickly look that up, right? But I'll explain. Yeah, it was. It may as well have been an arranged marriage because what happened is if you remember, the Silk and Thomas Rebellion had kicked off in Ireland. It's basically the start of the Tudor conquest in Ireland from 1534, and the Fitzgeralds wanted to calm everything down. So Joan Fitzgerald was basically talked into marrying this Englishman, right? But poor Joan then had lost a lot of her, she felt she had lost a lot of her independence, and that these Englishmen were very much like, well, a woman has a place, which she wasn't used to being spoke to like that. When she had been living in Ireland. And she wasn't even like anti-English or anything. She, before all this had happened, she very much enjoyed her courtly life in London and also her life in Dublin and other various areas. So it wasn't like she was very anti-English. Like her name was, Joan Fitzgerald. It's not very Gaelic. Although she didn't have any problems with Gaelic people either. She was Anglo-Irish. She went between both the Irish world and the English world. But the moment she married her husband, oh boy, did she go very kind of anti-English men. Okay, she still was a very, very good. They highlight this even in her letters and stuff. Was a very good friend to Queen Elizabeth. So she was still alive when Queen Elizabeth had taken over, and often a lot of the times there's letters in from Queen Elizabeth with a lot of kind of wink wink language saying, take care of him. Go and take care of him. Make sure he isn't doing A, B, and C. Which shows a relationship that's very winky winky between Joan Fitzgerald and Elizabeth, Queen Elizabeth of England. That they have a very close relationship, and it's a very wink wink. Especially when she constantly uses the language of take care of him or make sure he doesn't do A, B, and C.
Right.
It's not said like official do A, B, and C. It's very kind of suggestive languages within these letters, which are very interesting. Like why would a Queen Elizabeth talk like that to Joan Fitzgerald, and why is it always dealing with men? Why is Joan Fitzgerald always sent off to go and deal with these men? That are causing a nuisance to Elizabeth. It's very, very interesting language. Like,
Well, it's funny because hey, you say that, and that made me realize that the last time that there is actually a report of in the so-called medieval period, so 16th century is the last time we have a report of a ship going to Greenland, and not for a supply ship, like they stop there and they go up there expecting to find people, apparently, but they just find one single body. This is about 1540.
yeah,
So it's about at this time they actually find a a corpse, and he's dressed
yeah,
in European style wool garments and a garment that's made of sealskin. So and he's found face down, and he has a metal blade in his hand, an iron blade, an iron knife that is apparently so worn that it was very clear that it had been sharpened again and again and again and again until there was almost nothing left to sharpen. Like it was the last desperate, use of materials. Unfortunately, the report doesn't say it didn't say anything about the state of the body, but the report does say that it identified him as being European, or being Christian, I think is what they said, which in that era kind of equates with European. So probably his corpse was well preserved enough in that climate for them to actually be able to identify him.
yeah,
But
yeah,
that's it, and we don't know when. They didn't know when he died because his body could have just been kind of frozen in time,
yeah.
literally, from when he died, more or less, to that point. So, it's by 1540, there are no more Norse in Greenland, and I definitely don't think it's because they were hunted down and killed. That was something else someone said. I bet that the Greenlanders were all hunted down and killed as revenge on Eric the Red. And I'm like, wait, you think that peoples who were there for 500 years were ultimately hunted down one by one over a 500-year period as some kind of long-term vendetta. Are you kidding me? Like that's
Yeah, I've heard of that as well a few times, but I'm not a huge believer in it just
no.
because it seems to be more of a mixed relationship between the natives and the Greenlanders for sure. But especially coming to the end, like the Greenlanders must have been very dependent on the natives and stuff that were coming in from the area and stuff. So no, I don't believe in that.
Well, and the weird part is the vendetta I'm talking about isn't the natives to the north. It's that
Mm,
some people from Iceland were hunting down Eric the Red's descendants to
mm,
kill them for
yeah,
5 centuries. Like,
yeah,
no. First off, in Norse society, in Iceland in that era, you paid money to the people whom you offended, and that was it. Like
yeah,
they weren't big on revenge. They weren't big on that's a modern Hollywood myth, right? You
mm,
paid your wehrgeld, you paid the fine, you did your banishment, and that was it. It was done because
mm,
they recognized that having, unlike Italy, which had this problem, North
yeah.
society seemed to recognize that it was completely counterproductive to have a constant back and forth of vendettas for centuries and centuries. So yeah,
Well, it's because they needed to survive. That was the thing, because you can see that in the Finn cycle, where they
right,
still despite hate each other, and it gets very bad in Null Saga as well. Like, but the problem is, right? Null Saga has the lesson at the end: if you continue the blood feud, you'll wipe out each other,
yep,
right? Especially the coming the following winter. You see, this is what kills most of these blood feuds: is you pay your compensation, and then something harsh happens in the weather,
yep.
or you have a plague that comes in and everyone has to come together, and that's the end of these local blood feuds. Or you have a bigger group that comes into the area and they become the evil people of the area.
Yeah, which
So
actually may have happened in the
mm,
14th century. So there is apparently
yeah,
a a legend amongst, I think it's the Dorset, it might be the Thula, um, who that talks about the Thula, I think it's the Thula, taking in, basically coming to the aid of the Western settlement, which is actually technically the Northern settlement, and actually
yeah,
protecting the women and children from these invaders who come in ships. So, and they
mm,
use the apparently it's the word ship, not just boats, but ships. So that might be something that may have actually happened to the Western settlement,
mm,
but we have apparently there's no archaeological evidence from that settlement of big violence
okay,
like that. But this legend says that they came in waves, that they came first with a smaller group and then a larger group and then a larger group and then the largest group, but that the Thule were trying to protect the Norse members, the colonists, basically the inhabitants of the Western settlement, which also shows that there was certainly at some point a very friendly set of relations between the Inuits and the Norse, right, the Scandinavians, because you don't come to someone's defense if you hate them, you know.
yeah, that's true. But the thing is, it's very interesting as well, is that piracy becomes a massive problem in Ireland as well in the 14th century, where we see not just the Berber pirates and the Moorish pirates coming up, but the Irish themselves committing massive waves of piracy.
Right.
We were saying this before as well, and I constantly get asked this as well: is hey, when does the Viking Age end? And I'm like, well, it ends in 1014. And they're like, yeah, but they're still raiding. And I'm like, well, they kind of don't stop raiding, and they actually do
No
get
one.
more.
I mean, there's
Yeah,
there's always going to be pirates.
yeah,
There always have been, as long as
mm.
we've had boats. There always have been pirates, and there always will be pirates. I don't think that will ever go away.
Oh,
Um,
Rachel, there's a question for you to
okay.
go over. This is the perfect opportunity. Actually, this is the question you've been looking for all day. How did they keep warm in Greenland?
Oh my God. Okay.
Yes, there we go.
So there we
There she's
go.
off. Right, you want to
Ka-chow!
fire off the gun? Will I bang?
Right. How did they stay warm? Well, for those who don't know, we actually have a number of graves, dozens, if not hundreds of graves that have been excavated from medieval Greenland, and their garments are very, very well preserved to the
Mm,
point of you could almost wear some of them. That's how well preserved they are.
yeah.
And so we know that they wore lots of layers of wool. And they wore wool stockings, and they wore wool nail-bound socks, and some of their fabric that they wove, for the most part, it seems they wove their own fabric, which is why when you start slaughtering your sheep, it's going to get real desperate. So yeah, they wore wool, but it seems that they were actually weaving caribou fur and bear fur into their wool. So
Mm.
they were incorporating local textiles as well, probably to supplement the decreasing number of sheep that they had as the Greenland colony were on. And the
Mm.
thing is that, Philip, you looked at some of the pictures of the garments, right, from
Yes.
Greenland,
Mm.
right? They were pretty big looking, right? Like
Yeah, they were.
they're pretty voluminous. They're not fitted to the body at all. They really aren't. They
Mm.
are voluminous, and so you're wearing these multiple, not like this. So this is this is what people on the mainland were wearing, women specifically, were wearing under their garments. This is women's underwear. This is women's Lululemon from the 15th century in France, Europe, or France, Flanders, and England, basically,
Mm.
possibly Ireland. Um, so this is what you wear underneath, but the version they wore wasn't fitted. The version they wore was much more voluminous in the body, and so you would wear these different layers of wool, and it would trap that air between each layer, so that you're creating these, like, it's like double glazing a window, right? Is the best example I can give. If you have double or triple glazed windows, there's pockets of air between each of them that act as insulation, preventing the cold from the outside or heat from the outside being transmitted to the inside. So the same thing occurred. So yeah, they stayed warm by wearing wool and by lining their garments in fur. Oh, and the weird thing about the fur I discovered, yes, they were hunting polar bears, and that's why a lot of those hunting expeditions didn't come back,
Mm.
because they weren't hunting. They generally weren't hunting full-grown polar bears. They were hunting cubs,
Ah.
because this was another of those exotic items they could offer Europe, right? They were actually sending polar bear cubs they were selling them,
Mm.
and then those were being given as gifts to various royal courts. So
Mm.
most of the polar bears that show up in the records in various European royal courts actually came from Greenland,
Jesus.
right? Yeah, poor polar bear cub,
I
huh?
know.
But also, if you try to trap a polar bear cub and mama polar bear is nearby, that's game over for you.
Yeah, I was thinking that as well. Like you just start tiptoeing away, and suddenly Mama's bears behind you, tipping toeing behind you too.
Game over for you. But yeah,
And
apparently there is evidence that they were lining their garments in bear fur. So they were adapting to what their local conditions. This weird idea that they weren't is just so baffling. Like, they adapted as much as they needed to.
mm, mm, mm. I for sure. And I always wonder how they could have possibly kept their back. It goes full loop again, back to their feet warm, because we covered this as well very early on, but we don't mind repeating ourselves again. It is very interesting that that question pops up again of how did they keep their feet warm? Obviously, very
Yeah.
important question to ask, but it's
Yeah.
very interesting how it reappears again. Like,
Yeah. So they had shoes, they had leather shoes,
mm,
and they wore null bound stockings. Null binding is basically single needle knitting, and it creates a really thick, mildly elastic, very comfortable and cushy stocking sock. Have any of you worn null-bound mittens or null-bound stocking socks? They are so comfy,
yeah.
and they're thick, and they're very resilient. And the technique of null binding makes it very strong, so it takes a long time to wear out. I think it actually it creates a stronger textile, I think, than double needle knitting does,
Mm,
because generally the yarn that's used for null binding tends to be a little thicker and heavier. So yeah, they would have had socks and then stockings and then leather shoes. Now, did they have overshoes? I haven't seen evidence of it, but I can't believe that they would have. I think if
yeah.
they did, the wood has just rotted,
Okay.
because they most likely would have had wood overshoes that are called pattens
Mm.
in English in the era. Basically, it's, are you there, condottiero? If you're there, please bring me a pair of my pattens. I have several pairs. Um, they were these wooden overshoes that you would strap on to your shoes, and in many cases they were very thick, so they would elevate you out of the mud, and they would absolutely insulate your feet against the cold. People who don't wear patents, who do medieval living history and go outside and don't wear patents, are one, going to destroy their shoes really quickly, and two, their feet are going to get cold.
Mm. Very true. Just popping back over to questions that got asked earlier.
Yeah.
She, what was it, Lady Joan Fitzgerald. She was first married to James, the ninth Earl of Ormond. I'm sure it was, maybe I'm wrong. Yeah, she was married to an Irishman the first time around, which was James, the ninth Earl of Ormond. She did actually have a lot of nice things to say about James. I do remember that. Her second husband is the English guy, Sir Francis Byrne. She hated him so much. He's in the Tudor TV show with the eye patch, if you remember, right? She
Jesus.
despised him so much
Uh,
and ended up despising what's it
like
called? Ba, 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 ba,
Englishmen because of it.
and so much. Her
Yeah.
next husband then was Gerald, 14th Earl of Desmond. And as we were saying earlier as well, it was very funny as well because the that marriage, this is Desmond Fitzgerald. She was the Kildare Fitzgerald. So if you think there was inbreeding going on, no, 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 two different Fitzgerald families. Okay, this one is very funny and humorous because the reason why they were paired together, they did love each other, by the way, but the reason why they were paired together was because he was always rebelling. So Elizabeth was like, "Oh, I'll get Joan to look after him." You know, it was kind of one of those. Oh, Joan will look after what was it called, um, Gerald, and make sure he stops rebelling in Ireland. So that marriage is very funny. And he was only married to, oh no, he marries Eleanor Butler afterwards because she was quite old at that point. She passes away in 1565. She was born in 1540 and she passed away in 1565. You know?
Ugh. Childbirth, maybe child bed.
Yeah.
That sounds like a bed death to me, honestly.
Mm-mm. Uh,
Speaking of dying, how did the Greenlanders starve or go native with the Sami and the Inuit? Ah, Haas creates or host yeah Haas creates the eternal question, right?
yeah.
So that's why I
This is
don't, Philip. How
argued and
often did
debated.
yeah, exactly. How often did you see the title "Mystery of the Disappearing
Yeah.
Greenland Colony"? How often did you see some version of that in your readings?
There was a lot of it there, to be quite honest with you. And to be fair, there was some decent arguments inside there. But I'm interested, did Greenlanders, the ones that had moved over from the New World into Greenland, do they have DNA from Norway? Is what I'm wondering. If they did it, have they done a DNA test? Because if they do a
Mm,
DNA test, they could reveal something there that maybe the locals did go native because like no what was it Norse people were marrying left right and center, like that was the same in Ireland as well, where you have the Hiberno Scandinavians, and that only by the time like they immigrated to Ireland from what was it 820 up to around 860, and by the time you go up to 920 they're native. Like the Hiberno Scandinavians are a different group of people to the Norwegians. I know a lot of people go, oh well, they're Norse. They didn't. They spoke. They did speak Norse, but their native language was Gaelic. By the time you get up to 920, so only within about 70 years, the Scandinavians had become native in Ireland. So to be honest with you, I do think it's a good fair argument to make when people say, oh, well, maybe the Greenlanders became native. You know, so I do think that's somewhat of a decent argument to make.
yeah, and the DNA does say that. I mean, not
Okay.
like it doesn't say that all of them did. The
Okay.
D- the DNA of the Inuit there today says that at some point in it, it seems that they seem to have been able to trace it to the medieval era.
Okay.
That at some point in the medieval era there absolutely was interbreeding, but from the male side of the Scandinavians, not from the females. So it was the men interbreeding with the Inuit women, not the other way around.
Which
Um,
does make
so
sense.
that does, especially when you already have a shortage of women.
Yeah, I was just
Remember,
thinking that.
we talked about the fact that there is absolutely a shortage of women in Greenland. That there seem more men survive for longer. Women seem to be often dying in their 20s, which is real bad.
Mm,
So, at a certain point, and not being able to attract more people to your verdant tropical Greenland colony, you're going to, as a man, you're going to find other options.
Mm.
So, I mean, I think there was definitely some interbreeding. They certainly were getting very hungry at the end, as we talked about with that farm, where the farmer, someone, peoples had literally slaughtered everything at once. And I don't mean like they slaughtered it over the course of decades. I mean it showed like just kind of a mass slaughtering, and then they ate everything,
Mm.
everything. They cracked open the bones for the marrow. They ate their dogs. They ate the sheep, the lambs. They ate the kids. They not the kids, baby goats. They ate they ate the baby goats. They ate the calves. So they weren't even. There was very clear no plan to go beyond that season because they were eating everything. There was not going
Mm.
to be any more
Yeah.
goats or sheep or lambs. So it seems that at the end they were definitely getting desperate, and I think they were tired of eating seal.
Yeah.
Now, whether they starved, I don't think they starved. I think they left, is what
Yeah.
I think. I
There was
Yeah,
one fella made a comment earlier about the natives that they were kind of going in waves, as in they would go in, and then when the climate got too bad, they would go back out again, and that they were
yeah,
waving in and out of Greenland. Rather, because we keep thinking to ourselves that they went to Greenland and they stayed solidly in Greenland,
yeah.
when the evidence from the native side of things, when I say native, by the way, I'm talking about the actual
Inuit,
Americans,
Inuit,
yeah, Inuits.
Inuit,
But he
Inuit.
reckons there were other groups as well going inside that, that there were
Yeah,
other Native
absolutely.
Americans going in and out and interacting as well, especially with their interactions going into Vinland as well. And that they were going in and out as waves, that it wasn't a case of just continuously them staying in
Yeah,
Greenland, that they would wave into Greenland and then wave back out of Greenland again.
yep.
So it could be the case of, as you said there, that there was a little bit of intermingling going on. And then when I'm going to say the filthy word now of the pure breed, right? So when the last of the pure breed of the Norse
Banned.
were gone out, then the children from those relationships probably went over to America and then came back, well, the New World, and then came back into Greenland again. That could have happened, perhaps. There was one argument online about that, that they could have, gone and then gone back in again, like afterwards.
Yeah, I think that what it comes down to is that, like so many people have just come to the conclusion at this point, it's a variety of factors that led to the failure. The shifting economy, walrus ivory no longer being a prized luxury commodity, and the price of it having plummeted. Um, the little ice age, ice flows are and the other part of the little ice age that some people forget is the ice flows. The sea, the connection from Greenland, Vinland, Greenland to the rest of Europe is ocean,
Mm.
and it's getting to the point where it's covered in massive ice flows most of the year by the 15th century. So the ships that used to come regularly with new supplies, with fresh people, with news, they're coming once a year, and then they're coming every couple of years.
Mm.
And the last ship that set sail on record, from the last ship for which we have a record setting sail for Iceland, is 1410.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Just to be clear,
yeah.
for anyone who's just jumped into the chat now, I know the chat seems very bizarre because of the fact we're all talking about eating dogs right now. What's happened in Greenland is that there's a massive lack of food. Okay, so we're not like giving up farming in Greenland because it's fun not to. And
Yeah.
start eating dogs. It's because there's a real radical. But what's happened is there's a massive, because of the mini ice age and being up in Greenland and stuff, is there's a radical ice age in there that makes farming in Greenland very, very difficult. Plus, on top of that as well, I don't think there was much farming happening in Greenland at the time as well. I know there's parts of Greenland you can farm, but because of the how tough the terrain is in that area, I'm quite confident farming has always been difficult in Greenland, even going into the mini ice age.
Well, actually, so the where they were actually was very nice farmland when it
Oh,
was warm during
yeah.
the war. When
Oh,
that's
well,
why they went there. That's why
yeah,
they went there. It was actually nice. The problem, what made it impossible for them to farm, though, is that when the ice flows grew enough to actually subside Greenland, so
yeah.
Greenland actually sinks into the ocean comes up, and all of those fields became brackish. They
Oh,
became coated in salt water. So you
Mm.
couldn't grow anything anymore because they were growing. They were farmers. They were growing fodder. Now,
Yeah.
not enough to export.
Mm.
They were growing enough to live on. They were growing enough to feed their sheep and cows and goats through the winter.
Yeah.
But it got to the point, and I think that's probably why there was that massive slaughter, and also why they ate their dogs as well. It got to the point where they could not grow enough fodder. I also There's also some talk about usual thing we Europeans do. We go to a place that has trees and we cut them all down,
Yeah. We
and
have a
and
tendency
that
of doing.
leads to erosion, which means there's less arable land. And then the Greenlanders apparently brought pigs at
Mm.
first, but pigs are their hooves, like the way they root around, is very destructive, and so
Mm.
it also led to the destructive of this very delicate soil, and so
Ah.
they ended up having to stop farming the pigs because the pigs were just destroying the soil too much.
Oh,
So
lovely.
they were trying to farm, and they did until the little ice age literally made it impossible to grow anything.
What they tried.
So yeah, it was. I think it was always Greenland. Now, whether they went native, I don't think many of them went native. I think some of them may have stayed behind with their Inuit wives, the men specifically. I'm thinking of. I think any women left decided, I'm going back to Iceland, baby. I think they eventually all just said, no, we're done. There's no point in even fighting this anymore.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And that was pretty much the end of Greenland. Perfect timing as well.
Yeah,
2 hours in.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so everyone, let me see. Did we miss any other good questions? Uh, What are the differences between patents and chopines? Susan asks. Chopines are a kind of patent that is not designed. Well, chopine first is a French word.
Mm.
Patent is an English word. So there's that. Chopines are the platform ones, though. The real serious platform ones are
Yeah.
chopines.
Mm, mm, mm.
Let me see. Uh, Ursula comments the big difference between knitting and nail binding is that nail binding can be cut and not unravel any further. Oh, yeah, that's true. I didn't think about that. That's
No.
why I hate knit garments. Invariably, Philip, do you have any knit garments where you invariably create a hole in it because one little yarn snaps and then the whole thing starts unknitting itself? I,
Yeah, like a
yeah,
lot.
so frustrating. So frustrating.
Oh, stop.
Let me see. Oh, goodness. I am so behind on the comments.
Any good
I
ones in
wonder
there?
if they. Oh, Jim has a good question. I wonder if they eat seaweed. Uh, I don't.
Oh,
I
no.
didn't read anything about the plant-based diet. I don't even know if seaweed would have been easy to harvest up there.
Mm.
Um, I'm not. Depends on how the ocean goes. Whether lots of seaweed washed up on the shore. I mean, honestly, if they're eating seal, that's that's enough fish flavor for anyone. Um,
More
I don't
fish.
recall. I don't recall reading any any isotopic studies that pointed towards what kinds of plants they may have eaten. And
Mm.
unfortunately, the records we have that talk about like the sagas are one of our primary sources about getting an idea for life in Greenland, but the sagas are fiction
Yeah.
mostly. So,
Mm.
but they don't talk about anyone eating seaweed, as far as I know.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I have to say, I don't know if they did. Maybe, I mean, as an act of desperation at the very least. But some
Mm.
seaweed tastes real bad, by the way.
Yeah, I can do. Irish
Yeah.
seaweed isn't too bad, but Greenland, maybe. I wouldn't go eating it today, though, just because of the amount of dirt
Oh
that's in the
God,
water lately.
no. I mean, yeah. I mean, get your daily dose of mercury from your seaweed.
Oh, and plastic
Yay.
as well.
Yeah, and all your microplastic daily requirements.
Woo!
Let me see. Just checking for any other questions there might be. I wouldn't think you'd find too many wild edibles growing in Greenland. I mean, it depends on what you mean by edible. Mushrooms. There would have been mushrooms,
Mm, mm, mm.
but maybe not edible mushrooms. Okay. Did we miss any? Do I have any idea about farming? Lali, did I answer the question? Did I answer your question enough? Because yeah, we do have an idea about what they were
Oh,
farming.
he was talking. He
Um,
came in just as we were talking about dogs. Like,
oh, okay,
so
okay.
yeah, so yeah, I can understand why he turned around and says, "Why are you all eating dogs in the medieval period? What is wrong with you people?" Yeah.
I mean, for in terms of sheep farming, one of the farms they excavated in the archaeology report, they actually comment that as
mm,
they were excavating it, that it still smelled like manure.
mm, mm, mm.
Like they're excavating this farm from 600, 700 years ago, and because of the conditions, the way it was preserved, because of the in the permafrost, basically, right? Because it had been frozen mostly. That as it was slowly thawing, as they were excavating, they could still smell fresh sheep manure. How
That's
weird is that?
brilliant.
They,
It's
they
brilliant.
were
Though.
smelling. They were smelling the 15th century, Philip. Isn't
Yeah.
that cool? It's not the best part of the 15th century, but at least it's something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because I'm thinking to myself now, how good all the clothing and everything will be saved. You know, if it's saving smells, never mind everything
Yep.
else. Like, you know.
Yep, exactly. Which is why we have all those fantastic garments. If you all want to check out a good book on the garments that the medieval garments that they've excavated from Greenland, woven into the earth,
Mm,
is is one of the books. There's another book that is by Norland. He was one of the primary excavators back in the 1920s, or the archaeologist. Well, were
mm.
they really archaeologists in the 20s? That's a good question, isn't it, Philip?
My wife would say they are
what
not,
what does
and she would be very
what does
disgusted by that.
Yuki have to say about that? I'm going to
Oh,
bet she says no. They were
she hates
tomb
them
raiders,
so
right?
much. Yeah, she hates them
Oh
so
my god.
much. Oh, you haven't
Oh
seen
my god.
hatred and see my wife's hatred.
So I was just watching a documentary on the Chinese pyramids, and apparently back in the 50s they were still excavating those pyramids with dynamite.
Oh my God! Do not show Yuki.
Oh my
Do
god, talk
not
about a
show
Heinrich
Yuki.
Schliemann move.
Do
Jesus
not,
Christ,
do
man.
not, for the love of God, show Yuki.
The
But
rest of the world had moved on from dynamite excavations, but meanwhile, China was still doing it. Oh, and apparently Mao Zedong took a bunch of the royal bodies that he found in these tombs inside of these pyramids, and he had a ceremony and burnt them publicly as a
oh,
symbol of the revolution.
oh,
Burnt them.
lovely,
Yeah,
lovely,
yeah.
lovely,
And,
lovely.
and destroyed all of the artifacts that he found also. Isn't that
Mm.
great? Isn't that great? Lovely. Can you put books on Discord with ISBN? Susan, I don't actually have the book, so I don't have the ISBN. So just look up Woven into the Earth. It's not that I don't want the book, I just don't have it. Yeah.
Mm. Happy days.
I mean, sheep manure isn't that bad. Have you ever you've smelled sheep manure, haven't you, Philip? It's actually
Yeah,
not bad.
loads of
It's kind
times.
of
It's
green.
brilliant.
It's green and grassy,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. But
Um,
I live out in the countryside of Ireland, like so. Any manure is perfectly fine. Like I don't mind any of it. Like it's all good
Actually,
stuff to me. Like
right. So I'll share a living history disaster story with you involving sheep manure.
go on.
So I don't know if you know this, but I make my own 15th century pavilions. I've made
Yeah.
two actually, and giant hub and spoke pavilions. We're
Mm,
talking 300 hours to make one of these things. And
mm,
at the very first event where I get to use my brand new pavilion,
mm.
we set it up, roll out the ground cloth. It's this heavy drop, basically painter's drop cloth that I've cut into a dodecahedron to be the exact footprint of my 15th century hub and spoke pavilion. We set
Mm.
up the pavilion, and then the smell starts reaching our noses. So apparently they had been grazing sheep in this meadow until 2 days before the event.
Oh, yeah, that'll do it. I've been there.
And there was fresh sheep feet, sheep manure everywhere.
Yeah, I've been there.
And it had just rained, so the ground was kind of wet and a little muddy. And so my ground cloth was saturated with
Mm.
sheep manure. We had to take it to a car wash, one of those self car washes that have the giant industrial scrubbing mops with high
Oh,
powered water.
yeah,
We had
yeah.
to take it there and spend 3 hours scrubbing it at the car wash with our hands
Mm.
to get the sheep manure smell out of it. Yeah, good
Yeah.
times. The
Oh,
joys
it
of
is.
living
They are.
history.
They're brilliant. I love it. I love it. I love it. Especially when you have work the next day. So what you get back. You get back at what 1 o'clock at night, and you've got work at 6 o'clock in the morning, and your whole house literally looks like a tip. And you
Oh
look at your
yeah,
wife and you say,
absolutely.
"Bye bye, not my problem anymore."
Oh
No,
well,
my wife
see,
would kill it.
see, I've always done living history with my partners have to be living histories. I can't
Mm,
deal with I can't deal with muggles, man.
yeah.
Um, so, but I was living in an apartment at the time, so I didn't have a garden. I didn't have a yard. I didn't have a
Oh,
garage. No.
Hmm.
So we just had this sheep feces, this sheep manure drop cloth in our apartment,
Lovely.
waiting to go to the car wash and be clean.
What are you
Okay.
working on, Rachel, before we finish up?
Oh yeah. Speaking of living history, Philip, I'll see if you remember what is the one thing we reenactors are always doing?
Fixing everything. That's what you were saying
Fixing
there?
everything. Yep,
Ah,
fixing everything. So I'm putting on a new sole on my stockings so
um,
that because as always where do you walk through on your stockings? I walk through right here and here. These two
mm,
spots is where I wear my stockings out.
ah.
Do you not wear your stockings out regularly? I do. They're all in the exact same spot. Okay, well, everyone, Herbert, Herb Queen. I hate to say this, but we're about to end we are to the conclusion of our medieval Greenland live stream. So I recommend you go back and watch the recording from the beginning, during which time I can't hear Philip because my volume turned itself down, which was very
I
exciting.
know. It's brilliant stuff at the very start. Just the two of us going, what? What?
Yeah,
What are you saying there
can
now?
you,
Huh?
Philip? Can you hear me? I can't hear you.
What?
Okay, well, everyone, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Philip is Irish
Mm,
Medieval History on YouTube and I think other places as well. And we would like to say how much we appreciate you all supporting
mm,
us. The great conversation in the live stream, especially the part about eating dogs. Um,
mm.
and I'd like to thank my patrons and my channel members for all of your support.
Oh, definitely.
I'd like to thank all of you who've left us super chats today. And if
Yeah.
you're interested in supporting my work, then and you'd like access to many extra perks, such as lots of extra footage, my Creative Contessa Discord server, tutorials, digital resources, then consider becoming a channel member or a patron on Patreon. Philip, what do you have going on?
Right. First and foremost, I've got a huge, what was it called? Project going on with this woman called the Creative
You
Contessa. She's
do.
absolutely amazing. She does brilliant, brilliant work. Right now, I'm supposed to be doing research for her, but I've been pinned down so much with two other major projects to do with Wars of the Roses and also over my own Patreon, which I'll talk about in a second, that I haven't actually got back to her, but I will do. Regardless, the project I am working on right now with the Creative Contessa is help recreate a 15th century Irish ensemble. It is absolutely magnificent because myself and Rachel are hoping to recreate the outfit of with the Desmond Fitzgerald's during the 15th century, during the period of the Wars of the Roses in Ireland. If you're into the 15th century and would love to see Rachel recreate this on the YouTube channel, or you just support medieval history full stop, definitely head on over to GoFundMe at help recreate a 15th century ensemble, or just go over for an old nosy to see what's going on over there. Regardless, I also have a Patreon. You can go over there and donate whatever money you can to help support my research into Irish medieval history. Every Sunday, for people who are pay about 20 quid a month, which is a very low price for what I offer, I give out Irish medieval classes. And they're absolutely spectacular. And this weekend on Sunday, I'm hoping Sunday night if you live in Europe and also over in America, Monday morning if you live in Australia, and also over on the rest of Asia as well. Sunday night, anyway, regardless, I'm hoping to cover a class on 13th century Ireland to do with the Lordship of Ireland. Basically, life for the old French in Ireland as they slowly but surely become much more Gaelicized. If you're interested in anything to do with that, definitely head on over to my Patreon and spend about 20 quid. But you can also chuck in whatever money you can to help support my research into Irish medieval history. For the time being, I'm a bit short cashed when it comes down to the old books. So your money will be going towards both my books and some coffee as well.
Some
So if you're
coffee.
interested in that, definitely head on over. Yeah, yeah. Sometimes I do my live stream. Here I am bitching about my live stream views going down, and I'm going, Wayne, did you see what happened to your Patreon money? I spent it on coffee and a sandwich, which I did, in fairness. And just being honest to him, like,
Oh,
it was Wayne. Wayne's not on today, but he sent me money, and what was it? I wanted a coffee and a sandwich, so I was like, Wayne, I spent that money on a coffee and a sandwich. And he was like, yeah, no problems. So there, be honest with you, there's what your money went on to: books and a sandwich and a coffee. So if you're and it sports the channel, as a historian, I have to be well fed and well watered.
right.
Anyway, I leave myself off the hook there, and I'll let you finish up there, Rachel, before I waffle too much.
Okay, we had one final question. This is it. This is the final question we're going to answer. Were shifts side lace? So a shift is a smock. Just so everyone knows, the word
Mm.
shift is not a medieval word. It's a modern costuming word. It seems to appear in the 18th
Ah,
century. So these were actually called
okay.
smocks in
Mm.
15th century English. They're called what are they called in Irish, Philip?
You told me. I cannot
Starts with
remember
an
what's going
L.
on with it.
Dude, it starts with an L. This is the
Oh,
Lena.
Lena. You're talking about Lena.
Yeah, this
Yeah,
is
yeah,
the
Lena. Yeah,
Lena.
yeah,
Right? They're called a camicia in Italian, a chemise in French, hemp in German, or a camisa in Spanish. Right? Were they side laced? There is one smock, a fitted
yeah.
smock from Germany that is, and there's visual evidence of it as well. The one that provides the breast support, also sometimes called
Mm,
erroneously called the Langenberg bra. There is definitely evidence not just evidence, they were side laced, 100%, because it's a super fitted support garment. So that style was side laced. But this style with full sleeves like this, I have never seen a side laced smock of this style.
mm,
It is possible that maybe they were in the 12th century from some of the literary evidence, but in the 15th century, only that bust supporting the over the shoulder boulder holder from from 15th century Austria and sort of the German speaking and the Bohemian realm, Central Europe. Yeah, those were side laced. At least some of them were.
mm.
But the
Ah,
style with the long sleeves, no. The question was maybe for pregnancy. No, for pregnancy, what they did is in this style, they would actually put a slit into the smock right over the breasts, and
mm.
that could be laced shut, but not on the sides. Yep. Okay, that's
Very
it.
nice.
That's it. Okay, everyone. Thank you so much. Until next time, stay creative.
Slán